All right. Kia ora tātou and welcome everyone along to our 23rd of June council meeting. First up, just for apologies, just noting that we have councillors Halalele, Downing and Schlack online. So welcome to them all. Otherwise there should be, I don't believe, any apologies for the meeting. No, so I'll move on to declarations of interest. So this will move us on to public forum. So I just want to say welcome to everyone that is watching online, to councillors and staff and to people in the public forum today. We're going to start off, we've got 5 minutes per speaker and we'll start with Mr. Henderson. So welcome, Ray.
Good morning. Back again. Right, rates. 22% at the moment. I was hoping I'd be preaching to the converted and you would have already decided amongst yourselves that at least 3% of that, which is the fuel levy, would disappear and we're back to 19. Now look at the papers that are there, the motion that's been put through today, and I see there's no mention of that at all. As far as I can see, following media, believing what you read in the media, which is always risky, the fuel crisis is basically over. There's already been prices resetting in New Zealand, which is quite quick actually, but that's been happening. So how can the council have a levy on its residents for an entire year for something that basically doesn't exist anymore? I think that's quite immoral. So the 2 to 3% for the fuel should be gone and we should be back down to 19. That 19 includes a 10% or 10.21, depending which papers you look at, to cover a 5 million deficit. Is there going to be a 5 million deficit? I see in the PAR committee that the April report says there's about a 5 million deficit. The May report says there's about 3.3 million deficit. So what is it going to be at the end of the financial year? Are we going to be scammed out of $5 million of spending money for the district? That's retailers, businesses, etc. are going to be missing $5 million of spending money, and that's going to disappear. Is it necessary? What happens if after the so-called 5 million deficit at the end of the next financial year we find out the council has a $4 to $6 million surplus? Are we going to get it back? Is it possible the 5 million is not necessary? I can tell you one thing for sure. When it comes to the next rates round next year, when all the water drops off, which will change things dramatically, I'll be making damn sure that the 10 or 10.21% for the 5 million deficit definitely disappears as well. There's no way that's going to be charged for another year or ensuing years. And that same applies to the fuel levy. If it stays in for this year, but that doesn't carry on as well, way beyond the necessity for it to be there. So if we pare back the 10%, which shouldn't be there next year, we're looking at this year, assuming we get 3% off what's currently there, we're looking at 9%. 9% is still too high. If we look ahead to when the capping's meant to come in, it mentions specifically LGCI, which is a cost index specifically for local bodies. It says look at that plus 2% as being the cap on rates. So what they're saying is whatever the increases are for council, let's just add 2% anyway. A bit of leeway, a bit of slop, a bit of lazy accounting. Let's have a culture of inefficiency in the expenses of council. So you go from the 3% to 5%, then you add on 2% and say, let's make it 7%, as happened in the LTP last year. Come around the start of this year, oh, let's make it 9%. Where does this stop? You keep adding 2% of slop, of lazy accounting, of inefficient spending. Please do something about it. Stop wasting money.
Thank you, Ray. We will cover off in my report some of the facts and figures around that, because there is a few things in there that I think we need to respond to, but I don't want to turn it into a debate right now. Do I have any councillors that have any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Ray, thank you for the comments. I just want to go back to your submission that you presented in this room not so long ago, where you said you would accept, or you thought a 15% rate increase would be acceptable. Is that still your view?
That was based on the hard-nosed figures that have been put in front of me. At that stage, the fuel crisis could have still been a problem. So I said, okay, that was put at 8%. I said, okay, let's make it 4%, because who knows how long it's going to last. But at that stage, that was on top of 14. That would have been 10% plus 4%. Yeah, I accepted the water. So a slight bit of addition for the inflation, but really speaking, it shouldn't be there. It was just accepting the inevitable.
So what's your position today?
I would like the council to come through with no more than 19, possibly even pare it back to 15. Take off a couple of those 2% wasted money.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any other questions for Ray? Thank you for your time, Ray. Appreciate it. All right, next up we have Jackie Eagleton. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Jackie Eagleton, and I'm not here to talk about rates to give you some light relief, but I'm the facilitator of the Voice in Action group for CCS Disability Action Waitaki. Voice in Action group is a voluntary group of people with a wide range of disabilities, and our role as a group is to raise the awareness of disability in our local community. It has come to our attention that people in wheelchairs cannot swim at the aquatic centre due to not having a changing room hoist. The changing room hoist is a vital piece of equipment as it has a sling attached to it, so people in wheelchairs can be lifted from their chairs to be changed into their swimming togs and then lifted back into their chairs to be wheeled around to the pool hoist, where they can be lifted into the pool using the pool hoist. As you can appreciate, swimming and pool therapy has huge benefits for people in wheelchairs, including helping to alleviate bed sores, allowing the body to be in different positions other than sitting, using muscles that are not used a lot, pain relief, and also the enjoyment and a chance to get out of the house. The gentleman that I know that used to go swimming, he loved it. It was like the highlight of his week, being able to go swimming, but unfortunately, for the past 18 months, he hasn't been able to. And it'd be really nice if he could again. At the moment, the only way people in wheelchairs can go swimming is by providing their own changing room hoist, which is a large piece of equipment to move around. For those people living in residential care or rest homes, they cannot take a hoist with them, as the hoist is needed for other people in the residencies where they are living. For those people, the only option they have is not to swim. The other group of people that is missing out is patients that are having physiotherapy through the hospital. The physiotherapists at the hospital cannot offer pool therapy to people in wheelchairs at the moment, as there is no changing pool hoist, and the hospital physiotherapists are unable to provide one, as they are needed for other patients within the hospital. Once again, I'm quite sure you all know the benefits of pool therapy and how this kind of therapy can help with recovery. The hospital can help by providing the sling that would be needed to fit with the changing room hoist. The cost of a changing room hoist is between $3,500 to $5,000, which we do not believe is a large expense, but we see as a necessary expense so people in wheelchairs can enjoy using the aquatic centre like everyone else, and their disability is not hindering their opportunity to use the aquatic centre. In return, creating an inclusive aquatic centre that caters to all needs of the community regardless of their disability. The other group of people that we're missing out on is tourists. If they haven't got a changing room hoist with them, they can't use our pool or our spa, a sauna, is it spa? Yeah, so that is all that I'm looking for.
Thank you, Jackie, appreciate it. Now I'll just pass to Mrs. Bailey because I think she has an update in this space.
Thank you, through the chair, and thank you for your talk with us today. It is something that our manager has been looking at, and we actually put in an application for funding to a group that met yesterday. We haven't heard the outcome of that funding application, but it is something that we're hoping to install as soon as we secure that funding.
Thank you, thank you.
No, thank you for your time, and it's good for us to be aware too of what's going on. And I think, yeah, where we can also find external funding coming in from outside our community to do these sort of things, that's even better. But yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Right, thank you.
All right. So next up we have Keith Marshall. Welcome back to the chamber, Keith.
First ever in my life public forum. Scary stuff, this.
On that side.
On this side.
Would you like to be stated?
Oh, yes, please, if I may. That would be lovely, in fact. That would assist no end. Kia ora koutou, Madam Mayor, councillors, and everybody listening in. My name is Keith Marshall. Over a varied career, I've been a chief executive in 4 councils. Some of that experience is in both the private sector and in the public sector. Based on that extensive council experience, I really do know a thing or two about council decision-making and finances. I've spent some time examining your finances based on your own reporting. What you are currently engaged in doing with the proposed massive rate rise causes me grave concern. You'll be aware of that. It causes me that concern both professionally and as a ratepayer. I did not feel that I could stand by without commenting on the very real and unnecessary harm, as I see it, that you are about to cause. The Mayor's motion today allows for a different decision to be made. I want to be clear about that. That opens the door for you to make a different decision today. Please change your past decision today to a 7% rate rise as per the LTP. A height rate rise is simply not affordable at 22%, nor in the high teens for the community. You have clearly lost the trust and confidence of the community. Your decision-making breaches the Local Government Act requirements for decision-making. You are making things up as you go along, it seems to me, to support a poor decision. You have not sought necessary information needed for the decisions that you have been taking. There is no financial crisis requiring this level of urgency, nor the consequent impact on the community. Your current decision-making ignores affordability for your community. Some issues lie ahead for you, no doubt. I just want to draw some matters to your attention for you to take into account for your consideration regarding the Mayor's motion today. Namely, there are good grounds for a legal case against your decision-making, and which you are already aware of. You just have to refer back to the Jennings submission to your consultation process and your obvious secret informal discussion to arrive at the +3% in the meeting when you considered the matter. The second point you have issues around are there are already numerous and good grounds to ask the Minister to intervene and appoint a Commissioner already. You're aware of those yourself, and I understand from a number of you that that is foremost in your mind. Neither are overly attractive options for many reasons, not least of which the potential side effects that might occur for all of us. Today, I'm aiming to just put some of those matters on the record so that later you're not able to say that you weren't aware that they were in play. For example, the petition that has been circulating has well over 2,000 signatures that it gathered in under 8 days. Have a look on Google, check local government history, point me to another example of a community raising that many signatures in that period of time. Take note. So what crisis, what urgency, what solution? The Auditor General does not think there is a financial crisis requiring urgent redress. Read your audit reports. There is no urgency of the kind you seem to believe. The Minister seemingly doesn't believe there is urgency or need for redress either. The Minister himself asks you to address the financial issues over time and in the long term. And those are his quotes, not mine. You can read that in the letter he provided. You don't have the basic future financial information needed to proceed with a high rates decision, given the already major changes coming, and that is also forefront in your mind. What's worse, the rates rise that you are proposing to put through doesn't actually address any of the issues that you have suggested exist. You have also given no formal nor data-driven consideration to the affordability of your decision or the harm that it caused in the community. Your own community and other observers are astounded that you even think 22% is remotely affordable, especially given all of the election promises that each and every one of you made. So to close, a high rate rise is unaffordable, whether 22% or in the high teens as proposed today. The 11 of you, and only the 11 of you at this table with voting powers, have the opportunity to decide what that harm is. But make no mistake, it will with absolute certainty cause harm in your community, and quite unnecessarily. This decision is your own personal decision to make. Nobody is forcing you to vote one way or the other. You are entirely individually responsible for that vote. I urge you to make that choice and vote based on a full set of information. Decide based on what you stand for, and decide based on the sort of person you are. Accordingly, please vote to limit your rates to the audited LTP rise of just 7%. Yep, and I know that's going to require some extreme financial discipline on your part internally. In fact, your team are going to have to recut budgets to do that. But actually, that was the basis of the budgets you laid up on the 26th of May as your start point. Then take time during the upcoming LTP process, whatever that turns out to be, given the nonsense changes that are afoot, and consider how you might proceed with the future strategic financial management of the district at that time, once you know what those future parameters are. Right now, you desperately need, I think, to re-earn some community trust in order to secure your own ongoing political mandate. Because without that, actually, the changes that you're aiming to write around council and its future position are going to be gone. So today is the time and the day to do the right thing. Vote in favour of a rise of only 7%. It's really easy. The motion's there from the Mayor. Add in the words overall rate rise of 7%, alter the wording at the bottom of the point, and then vote for that amended motion as an amendment. And look, and if you don't, as I said, I don't have a vote here, staff don't have a vote here, the community don't have a vote here, just you do. But be aware that it does cause harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Is there any questions anyone has for Mr. Marshall? Councillor Hopkins.
Keith, yeah, I've got a number of questions. A lot of what you said, certainly in the first half of that presentation, were statements like decision-making, our decision-making breaches the Local Government Act, but you didn't say how or why or cite the section. But, and you may want to comment on that. I'm more interested in that last proposal you put to us. Go for 7%. Now, every year I've done budgets, I've been involved in councils that have done set a rate. Councils have gone through all their expenditures line by line or by some process, worked out what that's going to cost and determined the rate accordingly. What you seem to be proposing is set the rate now and adjust the budget later after June 30, which wouldn't give the community any opportunity to be engaged anyway, or limit or restrict it. Is that what you're proposing? And surely that in itself would also be a breach of the Local Government Act.
I did come with a wall of extra notes, but 5 minutes kind of truncates you somewhat. So do you want me to chapter and verse potential local government breaches? I mean, we could start from the, and some of this is already in the Jennings submission, which you saw during the, through the consultation process. But we could start with, you had a 9% option, you chose to disregard it and went out to consultation without it. What's the prize from winning that as a breach? Probably the court would order you to redo the consultation. I don't think that's a worthwhile thing, but it is nevertheless a breach of a viable option. How do we know it's viable? As you said, Jim, the budgets were worked up on the basis of 9%. The loading that was put on top of that are for things that weren't included in the budget. They were existing deficit amounts that were already loaded up. But other breaches, your decision making around the plus 3%, look, you can watch it back on camera. I don't have to cover that. You haven't included, for example, I've got a list. I always have a list. The justifications that you provided weren't clear. The urgency, the need for urgency wasn't clear. There are comments in your own documents in the 26th of May, which I'm happy to point you to, that say that the debt cap was at risk when your today's Treasury report, for example, says it isn't. You were aware of those. You didn't seek information regarding potential economic or community impacts arising from the rate rise. You haven't considered the question of affordability in any of your decision making. You've just made assertions about it. You haven't looked at any data. I could go on. There's a long list. There's a pro forma sitting in my inbox for lodging an injunction along with some pledges of money to support that, but I'm not going to be carrying that out because I think that's a stupid idea all round. So there are a number of grounds. You know, would a judge grant an injunction? Probably. Why? Because actually there is enough question there. The judge wouldn't want to make the decision on an injunction meeting. Would the case be one? Who knows? You've got your own views about that. You're not. I'm sure your lawyers would put endless time to it. But to me, that would be just a waste of time and would be 9 months further down the track and you'd have been stuck with a financial hole that we all know you need to do something about at some point, just not today.
You've said strike a rate, do the budgets later.
No, what I'm saying is take the existing motion. I don't have it in front of me right now. The wording in that thing, I think, says set the overall rate rise, blah, 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 just insert 7%. The motion is to revoke the decision. I'll grab it. I can do it. I can do it verbatim for you if you like. But you can insert the words. This is a decision you can make today. The Mayor is asking you to effectively strike or move forward with the motion at 17%-ish. So instead of moving it forward at 17%, move it forward at 7%.
I just want to be clear that decisions the whole way through have been up to individual councillors. There's certainly never been any pressure put on any councillors to do anything than make the decision off their own bat. So just that was something you raised before. And I think that we've got a very good council in that respect, that they all have the absolute ability to make their own calls. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mayor Tavendale. Thank you, Keith, for your presentation. How do you justify 7% as being fiscally responsible?
That's a great question, Dan. I don't have to really. You kind of did that work in the LTP. It got audited. You spent 400 grand getting it audited, and you ticked it off. In your budget papers of the 26th of May. So just sticking with the most latest set, it's there as the baseline, to which you've then added in that course of that budget conversation an extra 2%. That's why the 7% is realistic. You could have said, that's what's being presented to us by staff. We would like you to go and work around that and come back with the set of budgets that meet a 7% rate rise. And yes, so you do that already. You did it last year. For example, in your own reporting today, so I'm not making this up, right? So this is your own reporting that you considered just this morning. One of the line items that you're running behind on in deficit is unbudgeted staff savings. So that means to me, as a former chief executive, there was a line item put in because you couldn't identify the cost savings of staff savings. Or maybe you had, I don't know. But there was a line item that has simply not been met. Right? That's in the 7 and 9%. So it's fiscally responsible to the fact that you're meeting it. What happened in that paper, and I can quote it for you, the words were quite clear, I think. There is a risk. This is in around the justification of the 9%, not written by me, considered by you. There is a risk around the 9% that you might get close to your debt cap. Today's Treasury report, this morning's Treasury report, says the maximum amount you're going to reach is 128 million, and that assumes that all the capital projects get finished and drawn down on, which we all know isn't going to happen. We also all know that you're under some real requirements to meet your water plan items, right? You absolutely are. And I said to Sven and others, you know, like the king standing down at the tide saying the tide's not going to come in is not a way. You can't just say, oh, there's $35 million. You don't deliver $35 million. We all know you're not going to do it, right? Yeah, by all means, put it in, but it doesn't change your 9%. That's why 7 is affordable and doable.
Councillor Downing.
Yeah, hi, Keith. I agree with that you said we're in a financial hole that we've got to do something about at some point, and obviously you're arguing today's not the day. I guess there's always change going on in local government. There's no real certainty on the horizon. What would be different in the future, do you think, that a council like this sitting around the table might suddenly decide that finally it is the time to face up to the big costs? Like, for instance, the fuel, you talk about the LTP 7%, but when that was set, I think fuel was about $1.90 diesel. It's back down to $2.40 today from $3.40. And, you know, you've mentioned the water, huge amount of water work. It's unavoidable, and achievable or not, it's all going to eventually be done. We are going to have to pay for it. When, you know, what would be different in the future that a council might sit around the table and finally decide that it's actually time to start paying it?
It's good that we rehearse this discussion, isn't it, Sven? Look, there's no question that there is a strategic financial puzzle facing this council that needs to be addressed. I don't disagree with that. What I do also say to you is that you don't know what the impacts are going to be on your balance sheet from next year. We also all agree that. You don't actually know what their balance sheet looks like. Neither do you know what the water situation is going to leave you with as a residual hump of council and the stranded overheads. You don't know that. I don't know that. You don't know that. Nobody knows that until we get through those laid up change things. Right? So what will be different next year as opposed to this year is that those matters will be known. You don't know, for example, and the Mayor referred to it in the Audit Committee earlier, about the discussions that are already happening with Local Government Funding Authority about what the funding and financing boundaries might look like and the pressures might look like on councils in the future environment. That's known now that those things are coming. What you don't know in saying that you need to address this non-existent debt cap problem, what you don't know right now is what the magnitude of those issues are going to be in your budgeting for next year. Right? So I'm not saying that there isn't a puzzle to think, but we don't even know what it actually is. We don't know what the stranded hump looks like. We don't know what the asset values are and the asset components are that get transferred out, what values get assigned to them, nor potentially what impact on your residual balance sheet happens to those. And assuming that you can somehow get through a negotiation with 3 other councils who are going to be wrestling with the same problem, not wanting to bail your balance sheet out and absolutely wanting you to have cracks at theirs. So, we don't know those right now. So that's very different this year than ongoing. And that's next year
We
is
have some
amalgamation.
things we do know though, don't we? Like there'll always be things we don't know. We're always going to make decisions where we don't have every single piece of data available to us. That's just the nature of local government. But we do know that there's an absolute wall of costs coming at us. Would it not be better to start really biting the bullet now and get ahead of that so that it's not quite so bad in the future?
I might leave that one because I think that's part of a council discussion. I'm going to have to draw it in there or we're not going to get through our agenda, but thank you for your time, Keith. I appreciate it and for the work you've done in this space.
And I will provide a copy of the notes because there are a bunch of extra bullet points in here for you to take account of in due course. But by then you will have made the decision. So plea from me is you don't actually have to do it your own budget, so you don't have to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. All right, councillor, so that does bring us to our supplementary agenda point, which is the additional resolutions that I've got in front of us. So just to talk through some of this. We've got a number of things at play here, and the debt cap is a real part of this concern. And part of the differences between our long-term plan and where we're sitting now is the huge amount of extra spend we've got in our water program in the next 12 months that we may not have hitting our budgets this year. They will hit next year, absolutely no doubt. But what they do is they allow that level of borrowing, which does bring us a huge amount closer to our debt cap. On top of this, with part of the conversations we're having and where the 7% becomes absolutely unviable as a community, is we do have a very shaky discussion going on with the local government funding agency. The reality is they do not believe that we can fund our ongoing activity by any stretch at the 7%. They also don't see that we are carrying out our obligations and debt repayment through doing that kind of short-term decision-making. The reality is that we are in, and a part of this was a changing decision that we needed to make in the three water space. Now, what we didn't know when the long-term plan was put, which was also looking at keeping waters in-house, and it was, carrying on with that was a general direction. Since then, there's been massive upheaval. And if we just ignored the fact that costs have gone up since then, we've had DIA working with Amy Adams and ourselves to get our water plan over the line, which has increased our capital spend this year alone, absolutely massively. If we weren't taking that into account, we would not be being good governors, because we need to not just close our eyes and say things are exactly the same. This resolution that I have got in front of you, and I will refer to it shortly, does recognise that when we were talking about this back in March, which is the first time we really got a chance to actually revisit the annual plan after spending the entire time from December through to then working on our water services plan and trying to actually stand up something that would be workable for our community and would find long-term cost savings in the increases we knew were coming in the water space. So this has been an ongoing issue, and essentially we didn't have a chance as a council to come back to the table and to talk to staff around what our annual plan looked like until March this year. And at that stage, we were faced with massive changes in costs and fuel. And on top of that, it's not just that, because when we talk about, and it was mentioned through Ray around a fuel levy, these increases are not a fuel levy. These increases are actually looking at the true costs that we're seeing. And while we're looking forward, we may not see every one of them increasing to the level that they once looked like in March. We are still seeing costs in plastic pipes, and we've got a fair bit of that going on in our water services plan. Bitumen has gone up 30%. These costs are embedded in everything that we're looking at as a community that we're struggling with when it comes to affordability, around the cost of our insurance, around the cost of our power. Every one of those is being seen by council and is being felt by council as well. So the world has changed significantly from when a council put a long-term plan and approved it and looked at what the year 2 would be. And on top of that, since then, we have had to basically go back and revisit our water plan. Now, the effect of that has been, first of all, a massive amount of workload on the team, a massive amount of workload on councillors, and it's put us well behind the 8 ball. So we are revisiting at a time when we knew a whole lot more than what we did when we would have first looked at an annual plan. On top of that, a huge amount of extra expectation on what we had to deliver in order to get our water plan over the line. Now, around a 7% or 9% increase, LGFA have been really clear that they don't see a future in lending to Waitaki District Council if we are operating in that space. So there is a massive risk, and we have an absolute requirement to look at affordability for our ratepayers, but we also have a requirement as governors for the council to make the right fiscal decisions. Also around that is we do have, and I've been in discussions with the Department of Internal Affairs, we're back at the table today because there has been a huge amount of community pressure. We acknowledge that, and we also acknowledge the hurt that is going on out there. But there also needs to be a reality in this conversation that, first of all, every person around this table is a member of this community and they care. And I think some of the pressure put on has been fair and some of it hasn't been. And some of it has been really detrimental. So what we've done is we've got a team that are no longer willing to come to the table on the 22%. And that's why we're here today, is to bring councillors back to the table. I want to be really clear that decisions we're making today are short-term, they're short-sighted, and they're not good financial decisions for our council. So the resolution I have in front of me is that Council A set a new overall rate increase, allowing for the following factors. The first of all is allocating a special dividend from Whitestone Contracting Limited of $1 million to offset the rate requirement. Now, just to put some context around that one, that is absolutely something we've done in the past, and it's absolutely a viable option for us. And I want to thank our directors at Whitestone Contracting Limited for making that available. I think it's been, they're seeing that we're in a space where things are tight, our community is hurting, and they're saying we can help. So I want to absolutely thank them for that. This money around special dividend has been discussed for some time, and the original intention of it was for it to be funded to actually cover off some of the debt that we have in the event centre space. That, you know, we have $5 million there that was voted by this council or the previous council to be funding that $5 million outside of ratepayers funds. Now, we do not have a huge amount of different areas that are non-ratepayer funded. The reserve management is probably the main one, and that's going to be dipped into for quite a number of years moving forward. So essentially, we have got debt out there that we are not covering. And that's another reason why we do have an LGFA that are saying we have concerns about your ability to cover off your debt as required over the next few years. And when we're coming into rates capping environment, they have concerns that councils are going to struggle to actually cover some of these large debt requirements that they've got set up on councils at the moment. So while the special dividend from Whitestone, which does take 2% off our rates, is absolutely welcome and can be used, and we'll be putting that forward as a way forward at the moment, it's certainly not the best financial decision to make as a council. The next part is reduce the cost price increase to have a net effect of reducing rates requirements by $1 million in activities excluding 3 waters and the 26-27, given the expected change in global and local conditions. So essentially we're saying that we don't believe the conditions are likely to be as bad as they were looking like in March. And in March, when we had this information, they were at an all-time high, and it was being fed into all of our contract negotiations. Every service we provided, fuel was at the top of the conversation. Now, we've still lived as a council through that for the last, 4 or 5 months. So it's not been, oh, that didn't happen and there was nothing in that. That still costs you as a council, and it still hits your budgets. So being really clear on that, but we don't think it's at that level. And it's going to take some issue to find that $1 million in activities. But we do think that there's a tighten the belt essentially that we can do. The third being reduce rate requirements by allocating for cost reductions, savings and efficiencies of $500,000 in activities, excluding 3 waters to be identified during the year, which is exactly what Mr. Marshall is asking for. Obviously not at the level he's asking for. Us saying, look, we are going to try and find ways to work through our budgets even further and to nail that down. And that's where the work and the meetings through our PAR committee are going to be coming into play when we do look at things section by section and we try and find where we can make cuts, where we can find savings. We do need to have some tough conversations as a council as to some of the activities we don't do as a council moving forward. The trouble is we get a bit hamstrung in that conversation because if we change service levels markedly, then we actually are required to go back out to consult with our community. So we're between a rock and a hard place in that one. But the $500,000 is basically us saying we would like to challenge staff to look internally and to find where we can find opportunities and savings. There is a risk in this. And the risk is that our deficit grows because we're already sitting in a deficit for this year. And just want to just clarify on Mr. Henderson's comments around the deficit. The deficit is for this one financial year at the moment. We are still looking moving forward at creating another deficit moving forward. We've had 9 years of deficits in the last 10 years, and we cannot keep finding ways to ride those out. So I get this is not what our community is asking for, or some members of our community. And I really want to push back on the comments that were made that were saying essentially that we've lost our community. We have lost a number of our community that are really not comfortable with these rises. But we're also trying to get out there and actually explain the drivers, because essentially we are a small council that is dealing with a huge amount of cost increases, and we've got so much more coming at us. So just want to be really clear that we can't just stick our head in the sand and say, in the future, we'll deal with this somehow, because that's not leadership. As someone, Mr. Marshall, who has seen the end of a runway within our hospital company, that's then had to go back to central government management, like that is a concern. And we're looking at that, down the barrel of that, when it comes to the potential for us having commissioners come in. And one thing I think we've got to be really clear about in the commissioner space is that they aren't going to come in and put 7% on the table. There will be no way. They will come in and they will do the right thing to balance the books. And so the possibility of that being a 17%, I'd say, would be very, very unlikely. In the water space, which is part of the reason why 7% is absolutely not viable, I cannot touch our water services delivery plan. The Department of Internal Affairs have been very clear in that space. Our facilitator, Amy Adams, has called me and she has said, do not go there. We have had a light touch approach with a water facilitator that will not remain if we do not stick to our water services delivery plan. So there's a huge amount at play, and we do not have the wiggle room that is thrown at us at a really high level with no real answers. The answer is we'll keep kicking the can down the road. We'll deal with that sometime in the future. And I'm not buying it. So as much as I and every other councillor here has felt the heat and has had the personal attacks and has the online attacks, and quite frankly, our toxic online environment as a community is doing us all damage. And that's not just council. But we are, as a community, eating ourselves alive, and we're better than that. So I want to be really clear on that, because there's people here around the table that care and they're doing their job. And they're doing their very best to balance community affordability with actually keeping this council running. And I tell you what, it is a rubbish of a space to hang out in at the moment. And I deserve to walk home to my family and feel safe. And so does every other councillor around this table. We're better than that, Waitaki. I'll be accepting the petition when it turns up on my step. And I have an expectation for the level of basic respect that will be provided to myself, the Deputy Mayor, and whoever else is able to attend that. Because we are people here doing our best and doing our job in very tough circumstances. And we all care. And this has not been okay. Based on that, do I have any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Chair, you sent an email out last night. Please find my resolution below to be discussed at tomorrow's meeting. Now, was that the resolution you submitted?
Oh, sorry, I have
Then,
heard.
sorry, then
I'll
I
just-
need to make the point that it should not and could not be changed. But the resolutions in front of us this morning are not the same. They are not your notice of motion. And in my view, what is in front of us, the additional resolution should be replaced by the resolution you circulated last night.
So just to clarify, the process is that a notice of motion was submitted to revoke the previous resolution that was made on the 26th of May. Clearly, if you're revoking something, you need to replace it with something else. And so that is what the Mayor has circulated, which is also in the supplementary report, what the proposal is to replace it. I'd advise you very strongly that you do need to replace it with something if you do revoke the previous resolution, because otherwise you won't have an annual plan and budget. I think it's important to consider whether it's a separate matter or not, because you need to have an annual plan and budget. You need to be able to set a rate. So if you're revoking something, my strong recommendation is you consider at the same time what you're replacing it with, and don't just agree to revoke something without knowing what you're going to replace it with.
Yeah, so if I may, just to clarify, you've effectively split the Mayor's resolution into two separate resolutions. The first being to set a new, to revoke, which was the original notice of motion submitted to you. And then these additional resolutions this morning add to and embellish that and meet the criteria you've mentioned about setting a budget and a rate. Is my assumption correct?
Haven't split them. The original notice of motion was to revoke, which forms part A of the the resolutions that are before you. So part B is around setting the overall rate.
Would you allow me to move that initial recommendation, Madam Chair?
I think we'll get there, Councillor Hopkins, but I think I'll just take questions for a start.
Okay.
But I also just want to give staff, before I do step further into that, a chance to respond to some of the comments.
I did want to make a few comments, and I apologise if some of these are repeating some of the remarks that you've made already, Madam Mayor, but I think it's important to emphasise some matters. So clearly, it is a very difficult decision before you, and a very difficult set of financial circumstances. There have clearly been two recent events that are considered to have an impact on your previous decision around the Whitestone Contracting Limited special dividend, and also the peace agreement in the conflict in the Middle East. But I think despite these factors, I think it's important to recognise that the underlying financial position of the council remains unchanged, and that is that the finances at this stage are not in a sustainable position, and that's not just your officers' view. That's the view of the people that lend to us, and the view of the DIA. But it's not for them to set the rate. They advise us, they share their views with us, but it's up to you to set the rate. I think it's some of this has been said already, but the funding and rates requirements in the Three Waters area have been included within the Water Services Delivery Plan that you approved on the 9th of June. And these represent a substantial part of that 22% rate increase. So overall, I think it's about a 32% increase in the water rates that form part of that 22% increase overall. So the information we have from the DIA is that that plan has been conditionally approved and is close to being fully approved. And council is legally obliged to implement that plan. And if it does not do that, then it could be subject to ministerial intervention. I say could be because that's not our decision. That's the decision of the minister acting under advice of the officials. The factors considered on the 26th of May in your deliberations still apply, including the previously reported operating deficits for a number of years. The increased debt servicing, which for clarity does form part of that 7% that was originally projected. There's more debt to service to fund the infrastructure program, particularly the water infrastructure program. So it's not slop in there. If you look at our operating costs are what they were 2 years ago. But when you add in the additional debts that we need to service, when you add in the revaluation of assets and the additional depreciation, that's what's pushing up our costs above what we're experiencing in terms of CPI and in our day-to-day lives. So the information coupled with council's history of not setting rates high enough to cover the negative cost change and loss making, plus the current financial situation, which is still uncertain. I think we need to recognise that. We've got a memorandum of understanding that's leading to a full peace deal. There still is some global uncertainty there, and I think that's the operating environment we've got going forward, is global uncertainty and how that impacts this country and our finances in particular. I think a couple of other things just to re-emphasize again, we said this before, that there's been no budget blowouts and no unnecessary costs added. This is just the reality of the costs that are coming through from implementing the program we're implementing, the increasing value of assets and the increasing costs we're seeing out there in the contracting market. In the LTP process, the previous council asked for all the levers it could potentially pull to get the rates rise down. And there are some that have been questioned that were pulled in that process, such as the funding of depreciation of waters. But essentially, the cupboard is bare in terms of those things that we could do that don't impact service levels. And so, looking for further efficiencies is going to be challenging. We've done that through this annual plan process. We've built some of those further efficiencies in there, or cost reductions in there. But I think we need to be clear that it will be challenging to be able to do that, to find further efficiencies that don't impact service level changes. Within your report, we've included some further information, and I don't want to minimise the impact on communities of rate rises, but we've put some data in there which shows the rate rises for Waitaki compared to some of the other councils around us. And it needs to be recognised our starting point is that we're 49th most expensive, so 1 being the most expensive in the country, we're number 49 out of 67 territorial authorities. And if you look what's happened since 2013, where we've had this big change in requirements around water, investing in water, and big inflationary cost rises on council, if we compare that to a number of other councils, so Timaru in that time increased its rates by $1,875 on average, 102% increase over that time. Central Otago, quite comparable to us in many ways, increased by $1,892, so 120% increase in that time. Waitaki, $1,243, 60% increase, half the increase that Central Otago has experienced. We're all facing the same cost pressures. This council, previous councils have tried to keep those cost increases low for the community, listening to the community and the community's needs. But those are the facts, those are the realities that compared to other councils, we haven't been putting up our rates to meet the increasing costs that we and all other councils are facing. So I just wanted to re-emphasise in terms of the water price increases that they're in the water services delivery plan. We can't reduce those in any way for risk of government intervention, because we will have reneged on the commitments in our water services delivery plan. The LGFA is a consideration as our lender. We need to listen to their advice, and their concern at the moment is around our financial sustainability, and therefore, if we were to decide a rate rise that was too low, that'd be a matter for consideration for their board, including what action they might take, which may include restricting our lending or stopping lending to us. I think a caution here in terms of why I was suggesting that you need to take a resolution as a whole. So thinking about what you replace it with, not adopting an annual plan would be a very big thing for the organisation. It would be a material breach of the legislation. If you make a change today, then you will breach the legislation in terms of not agreeing an annual plan by the 30th of June. The advice I've received is that if we are able to resolve the annual plan within a short space after that, then we might not face intervention. But if we're not able to resolve it, if we're not able to find a way forward and set that annual plan and budget, then that is a criteria for intervention by the government. So I just wanted to end by recognising that the council is under pressure. from sections of the community. The community is under pressure. It is a very difficult decision, balancing listening to your community and ensuring the good governance of the council's finances. I think the point about the budget deficits was already picked up in terms of Mr. Henderson, but I think we need to recognise there are two things. That there's a deficit that's arisen within this financial year in relation primarily to income that hasn't been received, but to revaluation of assets as well. But there was already a projected 5 million operating deficit in the next financial year. And so that was there, and the assessment is the risk environment's changed. And part of the cause of the risk environment changing is because within this financial year, instead of making a small profit, we are going to be making a loss because of that income not being received. So the two are related, but are different factors in that.
All right, I've got Councillor Schlack.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon already. I thought we were still in question time, so apologies if this one comes late. A bit of a clarification, please, because we decided on a rate rise of 22% on the 26th of May. We also decided on officers in governance continue to identify, implement efficiency, etc., etc. I'm sure only a week later or a couple of weeks later we all remember what was decided was a motion by Deputy Mayor Ryan and seconded by can't even remember, doesn't matter. What I want to clarify, and I'm getting a bit confused because we've had a number of emails and my head's not in the right space. So I'm just going to take one that was sent by Mr. Hope yesterday, because it does mention additional resolutions. So that's what we're talking about here. So if you all look at that, can't miss it, first page, additional resolution under B, second bullet point. Is that's meant that particular resolution that I'm referring to? Because if it is, I think it's very light.
So
I don't think, what I mean with that is it doesn't really address the intent of that resolution. The intent of that resolution on the 26th of May is that we would, both officers and governance, start to work very hard on continuing to identify and implement efficiency and saving opportunities and income generation during the 26-27 financial year, with regular reporting to the PAR. And I don't think that same intent, particularly the cooperation between officers and the governance team, really comes out in what is proposed now. Or is it the intent that this whole resolution on 26th of May, which included the 20% and which included this one, is now null and void as well? Or does it stand as a separate resolution, or what's actually happening? Because to me that a particular resolution was very important. Thank you.
So, point of clarification there is that this is just to replace the part of the resolution related to the 22% rate rise, and that the remainder of the resolution stays in place. So this is additional to the remainder of the resolution in terms of those bullet points you referred to, with this resolution just replacing the 22% rate increase.
And just to build on that a wee touch, also the paper that's coming to council later on in the meeting is also just trying to cement some of that PAR resolution stuff to actually bring about those extra meetings, just to provide some clarity.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Well, sensing that there's not, would you allow me to move that first recommendation?
Just going back to the actual resolution, because I have that one I circulated and it does look a little different to the one on the supplementary agenda. So yeah, I know. So
Yeah, can we get the wording correct before we start?
So revokes the resolution as part. So the one on the screen at the moment, that is the one that I emailed around last night. Is that correct?
No, I haven't received it.
So I'm just moving one.
I did, oh, sorry, not last night, 2:39 PM yesterday. Yes, that's one. Yeah. No, so yeah, we've got it on the screen there. Now, just recognizing this is where it gets a little bit dicey, because we don't want to be revoking the resolution, voting on that, and then if we can't agree on number 2, that then puts into question the number 1. So I think what we need to do is probably start with the discussion on the number 2. I'm just looking to Arlene a little bit whether that's viable, if we are able to set that conversation and set the decision on that, and then we can go back up if we've landed on a decision around number 2 through to number 1, which is revoking the resolution, which will then line up with the decision that we've got, and then we move on to instructing officers. Councillor Lewis.
Just with regards to 2, the third item, can I make an amendment to the motion, please? That it actually says insert the words a minimum or minimum cost reductions of 500,000. I think that as a target, I think it needs to be a minimum starting point.
Can I just, sorry. If you're treating this as a notice of motion, the standing orders say that only the mover can make amendments, but it's up to you.
I guess, I think there's 2 ways of doing this, because I think that we can look at the minimum that comes through the power agenda. I think through this here to set the rates, we need to have a clarity of what the number it is we're landing on, because that's what the rates need to be set on. So I think that there's 2 things at play, and this is around the overall rates increase. So the $500,000 is what we're putting into the budget to line up with the rates increase. The instructions we've got, which sat in that last meeting around continually finding savings and bringing them back to the power meeting, still stand. Councillor Hopkins.
Well, Madam Chair, I was also going to move an amendment to bullet point 3. So it would read reducing the rates requirements by allowing for cost reductions of 1 million. But since we've just been advised by the governance advisor that only you can move amendments, I shan't endeavour, unless you signal enthusiasm for that proposition, which I doubt you will, to agree to it. I'm happy to support recommendation 2. And one thing I want to say to all of us, including myself, I believe, I've said in the past that we have a duty to the present as well as the future, and we have an obligation to acknowledge and have some compassionate response to the hardship that people have advised they will experience. The other thing that I think we really need to take cognizance of, and I don't know if officers have seen some of the comments we've had submitted to us by people like Eric Britcher, who's talked very persuasively about debt levels and how he at least doesn't believe they're as critical as has been asserted. There's also a degree of misinformation clearly in the community. For instance, he says in the midst of some astonishingly intelligent suggestions, he accuses us of wasting money through the rebranding of council services, using, for instance, the name Green by Nature. But that's a contractor's name. It's not money we've spent on anything. Nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is that there are people who have offered, I think, cogent and to a degree persuasive arguments in favour of.
Councillor Hopkins, I might just stop you for a second, because we need to land on, and I'm going to move from the chair, and then we can move into a debate.
Hasn't it been put though?
No,
sorry.
So
okay.
I will move 1, 2, and 3 from the chair, and then we will debate number 2 first.
Well, are we debating it now?
Well, I'm moving from the chair, 1, 2, and 3. Do I have a seconder?
I will.
Thank you, councillor Hopkins. And that's, yeah, thank you, councillor Hopkins. So now you're welcome to carry on.
Well, look, then, if I may continue, I think it's important to establish whether Keith Marshall is correct that the minister has said that the addressing of debt can be done over time and in the long term. I think the point he's making about the range of unknowns next year does throw into doubt the need to actually act as precipitately or immediately as we are. I agree with him that the debt cap may not be problematic if the 128 million projected maximum does require all projects to be completed, because I don't think they will be. But I was also emailed a letter yesterday, I don't know if others have read it, and you'll know that I did say when we considered the submissions that I thought Bernard Jennings' submission from Wellington was very prescient, very detailed, and very considered. And if I may just read a couple of paragraphs from this letter that I believe we probably need to take cognizance of. Council record, Mayor Tabendale says 7% is not, in her words, viable or fiscally responsible. Goes on to say, council records say otherwise. 7% was in the long-term plan the Auditor General signed off, which is a fact. So it cannot be called unviable or irresponsible. It carries the previously budgeted operating deficit. Now, he's not acknowledging the additional 3 waters and expenditure that has been imposed upon us subsequently. I'll acknowledge that. Going on, the Council's May 26 report calls this year's rise largely to reduce the deficit, not to fund increased expenditure, and says the operating budget will be similar to the last 2 years. That's not a crisis. On the threat of ministerial intervention, the minister has no power to approve or reject a council's rates or annual plan, something we need to be clear about. Intervention is a last resort for serious failure in a council's management or financial position. A council adopting the very figure in its audited plan is not a failure. More irregular is the council departing from that audited plan with a 22% that was never consulted on. So all I'm saying is this: there are challenging views to our own arguments, and I believe some of those challenging views have credibility or potential credibility and need to be considered more carefully than perhaps they have been to date. And they also, I think, sustain, even if they don't agree with the Mayor's proposed figure and the raison d'etre she's provided, they also, in my view, justify revoking the previous decision and supporting the propositions the Mayor has put to us.
Thank you. Right, any other councillors want to speak to the motion? Councillor Fellner.
Yeah, it's a question of risk to me. I think I agree with Jim that a lot of the people we've heard from in the community, there's been a lot of really good discussions had. The whole time I've been really looking for a solution, a way through that we could do what Keith would like and shift it through to next year. There's a few key risks, however. The debt cap is definitely a risk, as discussed earlier, but also the nervousness from the LGFA, to me, is a massive risk to the whole organisation at a time that our debt's only projected to increase from the current 90 odd million up to potentially 128 million, and that's if we stick with the 22%. It's a risk with the minister as well. In his letter, he's pretty clear on deficits are not not acceptable, and that councils need to address that. When we agreed on the 22%, I did come back from 45, accepting that it will have to be done over time. The more that we go down from that, I think the more we risk, or the more risk we're at from those things. And then you've just got the outright risks we've got of adding to our debt as well, just as a general thing, rather than, using debt for assets, we're using debt for operations, which is just such a huge red flag there. But this hasn't happened overnight either. Like it's been an ongoing thing, and I always like to look at the root cause of something. And when I look at the root cause of this, it is this kind of decision. That's why I asked Keith earlier, like what would be different in the future that a different council will decide that it is time to face up to what needs to be done. If the 22% has attracted this much attention, the reasons have been pretty well laid out. The costs are real, everyone accepts that. There's got to come a time to face up to it, really. I think it took us a long time to get to that 22% on the day because everybody was at such different places. But yeah, it was a real hard-won result, that. So coming back from that, I do accept the possibility that the Whitestone dividend, that could be used to reduce the rates, but the other ones I have further issues with in terms of risk. We don't know where that money's coming from. We can all probably have our own ideas about where in council it can come from, but we're sort of just accepting that we're going to go into a bit of austerity. We're making that decision to go into austerity without really knowing what that means, and it's probably going to set us up for some big debates in the future. So those will be interesting. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm sitting with it anyway at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Holden.
Just a point of clarification on that. Isn't that spend already included in the 9% long-term plan figure?
What spend? So just
That is referring to that cost already costed. That cost already costed in the 9%, isn't it?
which cost is, so I'm just trying to be clear on what cost you're talking.
The costs that we're referring to that need to be. Yeah. Another question. Are we doing questions still or no?
We can do, because you need to understand what you're voting on.
Just around the statement and the affordability benchmark here, married to 10% super. I'm just wondering how is that a measure when there's other people on sort of low incomes or rents or mortgages dealing with other costs?
I mean, it's the measure. Sorry, it's the measure council has adopted. I mean, this is how much work do you do, and I mean, this would be something that would be again considered through the long-term plan. But you need to get the full impact. You need to be a ratepayer, not, I suppose, a renter, because and rent rate is just a component of the overall accommodation costs. So very hard to come up with something in that space. But also renters generally have more avenues for assistance from various government agencies, whereas homeowners, particularly those on a fixed income, possibly without a mortgage, really don't. The options are limited. So that's why that married super was considered one that could be tracked relatively easily
and give an indication to council, but we're not saying it's an absolute measure of affordability by the wider community. It is just an indicator to give you some information to help in your consideration of decisions. It's not an absolute, and it's certainly not an absolutely broad measure of the entire community. Hopefully that helps.
I guess the main reason is that it's commonly used measure across the country by all the local government sector. So it's because it's a national rate that is applied, like that same figure is applied to everyone regardless of where you live around the country. So it's a nice comparable factor that you compare all councils setting their rates below that threshold.
Right, councillors, is there anyone else who wants to speak? Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. I guess when I made my decision to support 22% last month, I accepted that sort of significant rates increase was necessary because of the financial challenge that we've got before us, with the additional commitment to continue to find savings over the next financial year. And I still absolutely accept that challenge. We need to improve our financial position, and we absolutely can't compromise anything in our water services delivery plan. I guess what's changed for me is the discussions that have followed, and I guess being able to find a more credible opportunity to share some of that responsibility, because I sort of it hasn't sat well with me to say that we'll look for savings in the future instead of actually building in that expectation into our decision making today. And I'm not saying there's easy answers to this or that there's millions of dollars waiting to be found, but I think if we're starting to say that efficiencies are achievable and that's what our community is asking of us, then I think we need to be prepared to set something in writing and hold ourselves accountable for delivering it. So, and that's why I find myself supporting the proposal that we've got in front of us today, because I think it's not where a lot of people want us to be, but it does find a better balance for us moving forward. And a lot of people in this discussion have wanted someone or something to blame for why we're in this position, and that's come from ourselves as well. There's been discussions about previous councils, staff, central government, and I guess the reality is there's probably elements of truth in all of those arguments, and accountability is important. But I guess for me, I'm not as interested in assigning blame than I am in actually just moving forward and finding a solution, because no matter what, regardless of the reason why we're here, we need to get better. And not sometime in the future, right now. So for those reasons, I will be supporting the resolution in front of us.
All right, I've got Councillor Kells, Councillor Thowning, Councillor Slack, and then Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Mayor Tavendale. A little bit more structured here because I've written something out. I think I need to be pretty clear. I think I have been pretty clear about where I've stood throughout this process. And I know there's a strong feeling in the community right now. Probably today's motion in totality. I sit closely, I suppose, with Councillor Thowning on this one. That I don't necessarily support it in total, but I could, even though reservedly, accept the Whitestone dividend if it was earmarked to reduce debt overall. But I do believe that's best used for reducing debt rather than this. But I do accept in the current environment that we're immediate relief. My position is that there's real consistent calls for council to cut costs, reduce staffing, stop doing some things and focus harder on the basics. I understand the frustration and we certainly hear it. We've been hearing it in town. I hear it at the pub. I hear it day-to-day conversations for months. I also agree that council has to keep turning every stone. We need to be sharper, more efficient, more focused on what matters. But some of the things being called for are not decisions council can just flick a switch on. Council is bound by the same employment law process that anyone else is. We can't simply be discussed in a public forum. We have legal obligations and proper processes that cannot be ignored because public frustration is high, and we've heard this. We have commercial agreements, contracts, tender positions, legal advice and other matters that have to be handled properly. That is not about hiding from our community, but it's about doing our job responsibly and within the law. I also want to be clear on something else. And joining you, Mel Tavendale, abuse, threats and intimidation are not acceptable in anyone's world. People are absolutely entitled to be angry, frustrated, disappointed and direct. They're entitled to challenge elected members and council strongly, but threats on personal abuse cross a line. They do nothing to help us solve the very real issues in front of us. On today's vote, saying no to a 19% rates rise, or whatever that figure may end up at, is the easy part, but finding a credible alternative that can legally and practically be delivered is the hard part. I've said before, and it remains my position, lowering the rates without changing service levels means borrowing more. We're already over our benchmark. So the alternative implied by the motion was not, in my view, actually viable to us at this time, because we have to deliver an annual plan by the 30th of June. It does not mean I'm comfortable with the rates rise. I'm not. Nobody should be casual about this sort of increase, but I am even less comfortable making a decision that looks good on a day and creates a bigger problem for tomorrow. In our original resolution, we asked for work to happen around cost, service levels, structure, priorities, efficiencies, and how council focuses back on the basics. Some of that work is already underway with elected members and management. Some of the biggest structural work belongs in the next long-term plan process, where it can be properly tested, consulted on, audited, and put in front of our community. That is where real change has to happen, not through last-minute motion that cannot be practically implemented before the end of a financial year. I'm sympathetic to every ratepayer who's hurting. I know this is hard. I know I've lost huge amounts of sleep over this, and I know people are stretched. I know businesses, households, farmers, pensioners and families are all feeling pressure, but we also are internally with what we have to deliver. But voting no to the rates increase we originally proposed without a credible, lawful and deliverable alternative is not responsible governance. I'd rather wear the harder vote today and keep pushing for the structural work that actually changes the long-term direction. People don't have to agree with me. I understand that. That's democracy. I want people to know I am not sitting here saying no to the entire side of it, but I do want to make sure that we move forward in a responsible manner, turning over every stone we can.
Councillor Thelnan.
Yeah, I basically agree with what Brett has just said there. I wonder if, would we be able to take the bullet points separately for that reason? The Whitestone one, I'm more comfortable with us burning a few, what is essentially, value from the council company to keep rates low. It's essentially like spending savings in a way. But point two, reducing the cost price increase. Am I to understand that's the because of the fuel situation apparently reducing in risk?
It's certainly building that in, and also just looking for where we can find savings. I guess it's not an exact science on that, would be probably my commentary. It was me working together with the executive leadership team to try and find a viable level.
Yes, so in which case I'm less comfortable with that one, and the fact that while the peace talks have laid the foundations, they've got a 60-day window yet to go, and the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for 3 days now. The risk on that one's still higher than what I'm comfortable with anyway. But the third one I once again do support. If it would be possible to take them separately, I'd be grateful.
And I'm not sure on the theory, because I'm looking at the stars. We've got the apologies. It probably needs to be an A, B, and C under number 2. And I'm just checking with Councillor Hopkins. You are my secondary. Are you comfortable for me to move the stars to A, B, and C?
Sure.
The stars under number 2 moving them from stars to A, B and C so that we can discuss them separately.
Yes, I have been doing that. That's your request.
Yep, no worries. Yeah. So was that all, Councillor Felling?
Yeah, no, that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Schlack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I haven't changed my position, as I made clear. There's a couple of reasons for that. I was very reluctant to support the 22% decision, 20% on the 26th. But I had some hope that the 22 might turn into the 27 that we went out and consulted on, based on the savings that we could reach and other gains in revenues that we could make. Certainly the dividend by Whitestone Contracting never entered my mind and was not aware of, not being raised as far as I can remember in any of the meetings that we've had, and I think we even had 3 by now. However, that is what it is. I'm not even comfortable with that particular dividend, but that's not my decision, it's not our decision. That's the board of Whitestone Contracting decisions. So there'll be some questions to them when the next time we meet, because I don't think it is a good one. But I'm happy to listen to another boards or another set of people's reasoning behind that. Councillor Felling has made it very clear there is so much risk, and to be honest, if I look at what is referred to a peace agreement in the Middle East in the Strait of Hormuz, and having spent considerable time of my life in the Middle East, I can assure you there is no peace agreement. And even if there was, particularly with the current governments in place of both the US and Iran, whatever agreement is going to reach, it can be changed overnight. Now, I sincerely believe that if we would use our own risk management system over that situation at the Strait of Hormuz, which is still closed, by the way, it hasn't opened. If we would release our own risk assessment, I don't think we would even consider it to include that in our calculations. There's a number of things that I could add and say I won't, because, as I said before, my head's not in the right space for it. However, I do not believe coming down from the 22% on the basis of that a lot of people protested on it, and I fully take on board that 22% is going to hurt people. Just to put that in perspective, in the late 90s, I stood crying in the Social Security office at Lake Macquarie because for the first time in my life, I had to ask for a handout. So don't let anybody tell me, or an email, or a text, that I'm heartless, because I've been there with having only right up to the last very dollar that I could, together with my wife, we could live on. I know what it is like, and I work bloody hard for a living now in Waitaki. So I know what the hurt is. The question that I've got to all of you, or mainly to the federal government, what do you actually mean when you are taking the Local Government Act and you take out their well-being? What does that actually mean? Because one interpretation that I got there is local government, it is not your job to be social security, that's ours, keep your mitts off it. Now, I know that is extremely heartfelt and hard, but that is the frank realities. We need to get back to these core services. And if we cannot continue like this to create deficit after deficit after deficit, increase debt to until there is no more debt. Even now, the LGFA's put their hands up and said no more. What on earth are we going to do on the 1st of July 2028? When all this debt that we've got is going to southern borders. And all of a sudden, we've got these millions and millions of debt that we can use up again. I'm sorry. It's got to stop. It's got to stop now. I will not alter my position on the 22%. That is where I sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Councillor Holden. I've got her down the list a wee way. Yep, come back to you. Councillor Linwood.
Thank you. Over the past weeks, my inbox has been flooded with emails, messages, and phone calls from people across the district concerned about another financial burden at a time when many are already struggling. And for many households, this will still be felt deeply. I know many residents will be disappointed that we have not been able to reduce the impact further. As elected members, we have a responsibility not only to today's residents, but also to our future generations. We're now at a point where difficult decisions can no longer be avoided. This decision has weighed heavily on me since our initial vote, and I have lost a significant amount of sleep reflecting on everything before us, the messages from the community, and the long-term implications of the choices we make today. That is what makes this decision so difficult. There's no perfect answer before us. There is no option that comes without consequence. And today I find myself caught between my head and my heart being pulled in two different directions. This is not a vote that I cast enthusiastically, and it's not a vote that sits comfortably with me, but I will be supporting the proposed resolution before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fanini Titi. Are you still there, Hannah?
I'm still here. Oh, sorry, I'm just thinking around. Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity and through the chair. I guess for each and every one of us, you know, this is a decision that has weighed very, very heavily on us, and I'm mindful of all of the elected members' views, and I can see everyone's perspective. And I just feel that we do need to be respectful about the resources that we are stewards of, and the resources that we're talking about is not our money. It is the ratepayers' money. And when we take resourcing from our community, there will be those who will go without from parts of our community. And while we say there is a threshold or a benchmark that we have referenced, there is a view that that does come from a place of privilege. And the reality is what is affordable is not affordable for many families. There is genuine distress that has been caused in our community that will impose further hardship on a number of our residents, and we do need to acknowledge it. Those who are on fixed incomes, those who have no other means of financial assistance from government agencies, those who are in off-season periods for now up to 5 months, potentially those who are not eligible for work and income financial support, including those who are residing in our district, contributing to paying taxes and paying their way, but they're not eligible because they're not residents or they're on temporary work visas. Additionally, those who will be picking up the additional costs of having their rents increased as well because they don't meet the criteria. It's those families and those residents that I'm concerned about, those and many of them who live week to week, and they don't have the luxuries afforded by a number of us. And while we are caught between a rock and a hard place, I feel that we are left with little or no choice. And I do want to advocate for a much lower percentage, but I understand now, hearing the information from today, that that is really difficult. I also wanted to acknowledge the community action that has taken place from those who have taken the means, those who have been respectful about it. And I think it's important that the community do have a voice. I think our annual plan and our budget needs to be a living document with financial integrity not only to satisfy the government agencies imposing certain thresholds over us, but also meets the test of community integrity for our residents and not to impose further financial hardship on families that are living week to week, whose kids are short on lunch when they go to school, and those of our elderly on fixed income who will now be turning off their heat pumps because they're worried about their electricity bill getting too high. So with that, I will be supporting the motion that our mayor has brought forward. I do think we do need to look at additional ways to try and save where we can, but I think we're between a rock and a hard place, and we do need to look at where we can save to try and help support the community.
Thank you. Councillor Holden.
Hey, I'm not, just on point 3, and one of the points that Hannah said about advocating for lower, and some of the things I've seen in part today around these loans coming in, the 450k from Waitaki District Health Services and other bits and pieces that I hadn't really thought about. Did someone move on the point B? Did that minimum get the minimum efficiency of 500k? Did that get moved?
No, councillor. It was suggested, but only the mover of the notice of motion can make that change, and that change wasn't made.
Okay, thank you.
So the comment on the minimum comment, I think it's been picked up in the other resolutions that we did around the annual plan. For this one here, it's purely about setting the rates amount, and we actually need to land on a set amount, so we can't sort of have a bit of question in there. I think there needs to be that intent that flows through from the other movements that we've had before this, and that will feed into our work with the park committee. So it's still captured, but I think in this one here we need to send a really clear figure to staff to be able to feed into a budget. Councillor Hopkins, I will go back in your direction. Just you have had another bite at this cherry. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Madam Mayor. Look, just very quickly, I would like the comments I made before you formally agreed that we were actually considering the motion to be taken into account. I do believe we have an obligation to care for the present, a duty of care to the present as well as the future. I believe we must respond with compassion to the sincere and genuine and quite numerous reports of anticipated hardship that people have shared with us. The other point I would make to those who are concerned and also to our officers quite seriously, we did know everything we are debating today last year. It was all in the LTP, with the exception of the imposed requirements from DIA regarding the water services delivery plan and the additional capital expenditure, which have had an impact, and the conflict in the Middle East, both of which have been addressed in these resolutions. But other than that, we knew everything when we said 7, later amended to 9, and the 7% increase last year was signed off by the Auditor General. So it's worth remembering that agencies other than ourselves weren't as concerned then as we are now, and that they had all the information at their fingertips that we do today. In response to Brent, I would argue or suggest that there has been no more passionate advocate or energetic advocate for a fresh approach than myself. And I think these resolutions support moves in that direction. And I also do feel that the use of the Whitestone dividend is fiscally prudent. The company is owned by everyone in the district. It is the people's company, and this dividend will give the people the benefit. It will benefit everyone, and no other proposal to date is quite as universal. I encourage support for these resolutions.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, last speaker on that before I wind things up.
Thanks, Mayor Tavendale. This is a very difficult decision and situation that we're in. One thing I would say, just following up on Councillor Hopkins' comment about knowing everything in the LTP, aside from the additional requirement for spend on water from the DIA, I mean, that was $10 million. That is not insignificant, which has a huge bearing on the ability to do that. I think the real challenge is around the ability to deliver what's expected, and that time frame. Mr. Marshall alluded to the minister's comment about it can be done over time. When amalgamation discussions are expected within inside 3 months, time is obviously a different kind of measure from Wellington from what we have here, I think. And I think that's one of the real challenges. The other thing is my concern about debt ceiling. I don't think debt ceiling should be the ultimate measure. It's a bit like extending the credit card balance because you're hitting the limit. I think we really do need to look at where we can cut costs, make savings, make more efficiencies. And we're going to have to do that moving forward because post-water, post-amalgamations or discussions around that, it's going to look very different. And we've got to make those savings where we can. As far as the Whitestone dividend is concerned, I think the ideal scenario is to pay down debt, but it's a prudent move and use of the money as it stands at the moment. The reality of it is that couple of percent is a couple of percent that doesn't have to come out of our ratepayers' pockets. So it makes sense to utilise it there. We all, when we juggle budgets, we have an anticipation of what we're going to do and how we're going to spend our money. Things change. Sometimes you've got to reprioritize, and I think that that's a positive step. I really want to push to see more efficiency and more savings. This is not the venue for that at this stage. It's the LTP, and I think that we have to make that an absolute priority. So I will be supporting the motion and recognising that it's effectively a perfect storm that we're in at the moment. I do have concerns, like Councillor Thelning, with regards to the stability of the Middle East situation and how that may blow up again. But at the end of the day, I think it's just a risk we're going to have to take at this stage. So, yeah.
Now, my last speaker, Councillor McCain.
Yeah, there's some pretty hard choices you've got to make in this job, and this is one of them. And it's been everybody's pretty much said what's going on with all of us. We at the end of the day, we're all ratepayers, and we're trying to make the decision for the best of the district. You know, to those of you that have sent in emails and phone calls, they are read and noted. To those of you that have been keyboard warriors and been abusive, I won't say what I would like to say, but really grow up, because we're all trying to work for the district together. And it's not fair on people that you may or may not have voted for just take that abuse when they're trying to do the best they can. So please take that as being told. We are accessible, so have the courage to stand up and get in contact and know all the facts and talk to the people before you start making abusive calls. Enough on that. Today we're voting to change a resolution that was put back on the 26th of May, I think, for that date or somewhere in that number. Look, we're still not going to address the root cause, but there are things underway in the agenda today that may change and start investigating this and actually start creating a solution to the problem. Legislatively, we don't have the time. As Alex has already said, we're actually still going to be breaking the rules as it is, and it's going to be up to not our call to whether they accept what those rules are. But I think in the long term, we do have the opportunity to drill down the LTP. I mean, it's not happening yesterday. It's going to happen today, tomorrow, and the next day. It's something we can't put off. It's just got to be addressed straight away. Today's decision on reducing that rate demand may only be a short-term effect, and may actually cost more in the long term if we don't really address those problems straight away. I know it's tough out there, and there are no easy solutions. I'm still hung up really on what I still put my stick in the sand for, that I would like a guaranteed resolution that we are going to totally investigate of those solutions and how we can actually do it. Local government's changing, and I don't think the timeframes that we've been given are probably challenging, to put a better way of putting it. And the outcomes are not conducive if we don't actually take some of the stuff on board. So while I haven't made a decision yet, I'm just doing a lot of thinking right now. So that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. A lot of this has been said, but I guess the first thing I want to acknowledge is the people out there that have been protesting, the people out there that have been talking, the empty bucket. It has been listened to. We are trying. And I guess when we talk at the empty bucket, and I think in each household, there's an absolute truth to that, because this is not just rates that is climbing on us as a community. It's power, it's groceries, it's everything we touch, insurances, they're all costing more. So we're suffering both as individuals and as an organisation for in a cost of living crisis. The Middle East, it remains a risk, and this what we've got in front of us today remains a risk, and it's not a fix it, and it's certainly not going to be addressing the long-term issues. The conversation I had with a member of the DIA that we contact quite a bit, who has inroads to the minister as well, said that they work on a theory that for every dollar that we don't rate in today's world, in 10 years' time, costs the community $15. So when we look at $1 million savings that we're doing here, in 10 years' time, what the real cost of this is $15 million. Now, that came from the DIA. I don't know the truth and the ins and outs of that, but I do know that we have spent a lot of time kicking the can down the road. I do know we've been caught up when it comes to water, and there's a lot of reasons why we haven't spent in the water space. A lot of reasons for that I think can be well explained. And I think that until we actually had a really clear understanding from central government as to what was expected, that was always going to be the case. So there's the reasons that we've got to where we've got to are really varied, and they are complex, and this is not an easy way forward. But I do want to acknowledge the protesters and the messages in behind that, because they make a lot of bloody amazing points, and I think we need to feed that into our conversations moving forward and look for where we can find savings or where we can find efficiencies. I also on this want to acknowledge staff, because everything we've done in the water space has added a whole lot of extra work. You know, we had a water services plan which was turned on its head, and they've had to go and do the whole thing again. And now we've had them working on a 22% increase, and now today we're pulling the rug out and we're making them do it all again. And there is a huge amount of work in that. So I really want to acknowledge the pressure we're putting on, and to thank you all for recognising that when we are listening to the noise out there, and it is noisy and it's understandable, and we're coming to you saying, look, I know we can't fix this overnight, but we want some help, that there's been a willingness to come back to the table and to help and to work through things. So I really do appreciate that, and I want to say to staff that I'm sorry that we keep moving the goalposts on you. I'm sorry that we keep basically throwing another whole workload, our comms team, which isn't, by the way, 10 people by any stretch, horrendously overworked and preparing, no doubt, press releases at the moment. And you know, these things, they touch so many areas of council every time we make a decision. And Amanda, Paul, everyone in the finance space in particular, I know what we're asking of you is an impossible task, and I'm sorry. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that. The risk around this is we won't meet our timeframes, but I think that the bigger risk of not landing an annual plan is more detrimental to our community and to our council. And so that's where I've got something in front of us that I'm hoping can get over the line and can mean we can actually land an annual plan. We need to move into the future. We need this future discussion. We need to do this Head Start proposal discussion well. We need to get into our community. And while we're feeling the heat recognising that the reason we're here is that every rural community and council is struggling under the load. And we need to be able to set our direction as a council moving forward. We need to step into this future in our way, rather than having it done to us because we have overwhelmed ourselves in the process. So here is to looking forward and finding an unpalatable compromise in this conversation. So thank you all for your time today, and I'm going to go back to the resolution. I'll get that back up on screen.
We haven't voted on three yet, have we?
We haven't voted on any of them yet.
Oh, no, yes.
You have seconded 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with number 2. We're going to go sets the new overall rates in place and allowing for the following factors. I'm going to start with 2A. Okay, so that's just recognising Councillor Thowning's wish to have us discuss the Whitestone contracting dividend separately. So does everyone understand what we're voting for? Number 2A. Right, I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
No, that's carried. Have you got the names down there, Arlene?
So they're only against to have his councillor Schleck?
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go to 2B. Is everyone comfortable on what we're voting on there? Reducing the 2026-27 cost price increase to deliver a net reduction of rates required by $1 million in activities excluding Three Waters for the 2026-27, given the expected change in global and local economic conditions. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 Against?
No.
No.
That's carried, and that's Councillor Schlack and Councillor Thowning voting against. Is that correct? Right, we'll go to 2C, which is reducing the rates requirement by allowing cost reductions of $500,000 in activities, excluding Three Waters to be identified during the year. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. Did I have an against on there online? Right, was that carried unanimously, that one? Okay, so now based on that, I'm going up to number 1 because I think we can safely revoke the 22% now. I'm going to move that we revoke the resolution WDC 2026/11 past extraordinary council meeting held on the 26th of May, setting a 22% rates increase. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against?
No.
No.
Okay, so that's voting against by Councillor Schlack and Councillor Thowning, is that correct? Right, so that has passed, and we'll move to number 3, which is instruct.
That's one very quick question. Do officers believe it won't be possible to have anything complete, have this complete by the 20th, by the 30th, I should say?
It's in the paper. I don't think we need to go back to that. It's been clearly stated in the paper of supporting information. So number 3 again, instructs officers to prepare the 2026-27 annual plan and rates resolution with the total rates levied based on the above adjustments. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
That's carried. And that was a no by Councillor, was it Thowning and Slack?
Correct.
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 All right, so that has passed. And with that, and I'm only about an hour late, we will break for lunch.
Just a question.
Madam Toverdale, I'd like to be excused for the rest of the meetings, if you don't mind.
Yes, understood, Councillor Schlack, thank you.
So at what time do you expect to be back, Mel?
Let's go for 2 o'clock.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will get back into it. I'll just get you all to sorry, I've just got some councillors that aren't listening. Right, so welcome back. And I just want to clarify something about the resolutions that we passed before around our rates increase. Because we've sent a press release out just basically with what that means. And it does mean essentially around 17%. So just to give a really high level description of what the different decisions we made today mean, the special dividend from Whitestone Contracting of $1 million is essentially 2% off the rate rise. The $1 million in cost price increase in reducing the rates requirement, that's another 2%. And then the efficiencies and activities that we've looked for, the $500,000, looking at cost reductions, that's another 1%. So all up between those three decisions that we made, that comes to approximately, there's accounting bits and pieces in there, but around the 17% mark. So just to clarify that. And now we will move on to the CE's report, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I'll take it as read, but make a few introductory comments about this. So a reminder, this report is about organisational performance and also a bit about the current context that we're operating in as a council. And in summary, the council is delivering significant results, including completion of major capital projects and continued progress in other areas. But at the same time, the scale of the work programme, the pace of government reform, financial constraints and pressures on staff will mean that we need to be disciplined over the next 12 months in terms of where we focus time and attention and be clear on what the priorities are. In terms of some key issues, just to highlight the framework that we've got here is the organisational performance management framework, complicated name for a system that tries to align what you see as governance as the priorities with what is actually delivered on the ground by services and by staff. The current priority outcomes and KPIs were set by the last council for the whole of the organisation. So they're not just CE KPIs, they actually form a basis for determining how the overall organisation is performing. The organisation is delivering, but as we've touched on in council already this morning and also in PAR, the programme is bigger than the current capacity, and that's a challenge that we're working through at the moment. The KPIs and the priority outcomes represent a significant programme of work on top of what's already in the long-term plan. And the current performance shows that we don't have unlimited capacity, and delivery is being affected by a variety of factors. So the availability of people resource, finance, but also the reform programme that we're having to respond to, local water done well and our revised water services delivery plan, and the other government reforms that are impacting us. In terms of the capital programme, there are some big successes in there in terms of some of the most significant projects we've ever delivered, including the Network Waitaki Event Centre, which is our largest ever capital programme. And we can see some of the benefits of the changes we made through transformation in terms of introducing a PMO, project management office, to help us deliver better within this area starting to come through. But there are clearly delays in parts of the capital programme against where we thought expenditure would be. And I've outlined some of these in the report. That there are systems that are bedding in with the PMO and the rest of the organisation, which means that we are taking more time to actually plan projects better, which overall has a benefit in terms of making sure projects are delivered in a timely way and on budget, but it means more work is done up front. Water is obviously our biggest part of that capital project, and the last council directed us to wait until the Te Mata Arawai acceptable solutions were released. So these were solutions for rural mixed water schemes, which a lot of our non-compliant schemes are. So those didn't actually get agreed until we were well into September. So a quarter of the year was lost in terms of planning those projects whilst we awaited those acceptable solutions. And you've seen in previous council meetings some of those projects now coming through to the point of procuring the delivery of those. But I think, as was said in PAR this morning, there is a need for us to work through this and do some more realistic capital programming, recognising that a lot of projects, they won't be delivered within one financial year. Many of them will span more than one financial year, and we need to think about how we profile that a bit more. Local water done well, as was mentioned this morning, it's required significant organisational effort from governance and from staff as well. But we have submitted the water services delivery plan within the timeframes that we agreed and were set out for us. In fact, ahead of timeframes, and we understand that we are likely to get the green light on that. And that means we can focus on the next bit, which is helping to establish Southern Waters done well. So whilst there's a small team there working dedicated on Southern Waters, and we've helped by putting people into that team, it does require effort from the rest of the organisation. And the next phase is substantial as we look at the governance, staffing, assets and systems, and the operating model. And in particular, how do we safely transfer our services and our staff and our assets into this new entity, and by the 1st of July next year, which seems like a long way away, a year, but there is a lot to do. And staff from across the organisation will be significantly involved in this, and those are some of the same staff that will be also expected to deliver that ambitious capital programme that we have as well. I just also highlight the annual plan and the long-term plan, and obviously we've been discussing that this morning. But in terms of the council's long-term financial position, we will need to put a lot of effort into the long-term plan, more so than previous long-term plans. It is a plan that will be a big change for the organisation, and because of the time we've taken with reforms and also on the annual plan, the time we've got now for the long-term plan is shrinking quite rapidly. And I think we're going to need to be very careful in terms of the planning of governance time and staff time to make sure that we get the result we need from that in terms of setting a clear strategic direction and having a process that really fundamentally reviews everything we do, reviews all of our services, considers service levels, considers how we make sure we remove those stranded overheads from water, which we don't know what those look like yet, but we're working on that, but also identify the opportunities for genuine efficiency and income generation, more commercial opportunities, but also opportunities to deliver differently. So we are waiting to conclude the annual plan process and then quite rapidly get into that long-term plan so that we can start work on that. It will mean changes that will need to be consulted on with our community. And so a intense period of work after July will be needed so that we can be clear on what those changes are that we want to talk to our community about. Government reform is a huge demand on our capacity and not something something that's very difficult to plan for. We've got RMA replacements, with spatial planning coming in, emergency management changes, rate capping, simplifying local government, amongst other things. And our position as a council is extremely complex on most of these because of our being split between two regions. So it means, for example, on the RMA reform, we will be required to do 2 spatial plans, and there's an item on the agenda today on that. And it does mean we have to put double the resource into this compared to most councils. Simplifying local government, we've talked about a lot, but I think we need to highlight this will continue to take resource, and we need to make sure we resource it sufficiently. It's a big decision for the council and for the community that will have an impact for potentially for decades in terms of how this district is served. Government has made it clear with all of these reforms, there isn't central government funding to support them. They were needed to be funded by councils and their ratepayers, and this will be coming in at the same time as they introduce a rates cap on councils. I just wanted to highlight the staffing side as well. So we've now got the results of our annual staff survey, and I think this was most of the survey was completed before we got into the annual plan process and consultation. I think it's good to see staff engagement continue to improve overall, really good participation within the survey, better scores around wellbeing, manager support, teamwork and goal alignment. But as reported in PAR this morning, staff wellbeing and capacity are now strategic risks. And the staff engagement survey shows, I think, despite the uncertainty that we live in, there's a cautiously positive workforce who are really, really proud to work for this community, and they have, they hold strong community purpose, and that's why they turn up to work every day and do the best job that they can. But they live under a lot of uncertainty from the water transfer, from local government reform, and some of the feelings in terms of the hostility from the community out there. But real work pressures as well, which means we need to look more closely at how we prioritise. So happy to answer questions, but overall council is making good progress, but in what is a challenging environment, which is knocking us off course in some parts. The next 12 months will be really demanding for governance and for staff, and our success will depend on clear strategic direction, clear prioritisation, and realistic programming in terms of how we use our resources to get through the most important work that the council does.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Ms. Amdale. I have a number of questions, but there's a couple of categories that I wouldn't mind exploring with you, Mr. Palmer. On page 5, you talk about the fact that there is insufficient resource, people and finance to deliver the LTP and the priority outcomes. You also talk about how we have had, as a result of the changes internally, an unrealistic spending profile. And on page 32, you identify that we have a $60 million CapEx budget with 18 million carried forward. That's nearly 1/3 of the new budget. And I know that Paul gave us a pretty comprehensive and satisfactory explanation for the current CapEx carry forwards, but based on what you're saying that we structurally can't deliver, is how I interpret this report. And if that's the case, are you of the view that we need now to actually adjust one budget or the other? If we have got insufficient resource, don't we have to respond by cutting our cloth accordingly?
So I'm probably not saying either. So also mentioned at PAR this morning, Mr. Cook mentioned about the portfolio board that we've established, and that's looking at how do we use our resources most effectively. I think it's fair to say that most public organisations, including councils, you don't get generally 100% delivery. And my question is, can we get to what is a realistic delivery of that capital programme, and have we got the profile right for that? And that's the question I raise in here. So we had in this financial year projects that were to be delivered by the end of this year, where actually once you get into planning those projects, it's clear that they were never going to be delivered in this financial year, but you couldn't determine that at the start when that budget was set. So it is a mixture of things. We need to be better at planning the projects and fitting that into where that's going to land in terms of expenditure, and we need to be better at using our resources. And some of these systems and processes that we've brought in through the project management office, we need a bit of time to bed in as well. And the team is looking at how we use our resources most effectively in that. I think it's unrealistic to be cutting back the programme, because most of the programme is water and roading. We've already been through that process of looking at what can come out, and there's we've taken out what can come out or shifted out to later dates. So that's not realistic. And in terms of where we're at with resources, we've set up a PMO to help deliver this. We've cut staffing overall to enable that capacity. But I think when we're going into a big change at the end of this year with waters coming out, I don't think it'd be realistic to or prudent to be adding permanent staff resources. We're looking at what are the additional resources we could be drawing upon to make sure that we deliver that program, and that might mean delivering some of those projects in a different way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, the other big sort of major strategic area is referenced on page 9. In your report, you say that our budget deficit is principally the result of late grants payments. And on page 32 again, you signal an intention to replace the grants that have been paid or are late in being paid. You signal an intention to replace those late grants to fund the $13 million deficit with borrowing. Is that officer's intentions? Because I would be uncomfortable about that.
So, I mean, that's as has been reported in part. So, for example, if you take the funding that we're due in terms of the event centre, clearly, we've built the event centre, the bills are coming in. We haven't had all the funding that's been committed within the timeframe to meet those bills. So it means by default that to be able to pay those bills, we need to borrow the money whilst we await those grants and fundraising to come in.
So the intention to borrow specifically relates to the event centre?
Well, it's in those other areas as well. So I quoted the event centre. You've got the Forrester Gallery in there as well. So we're still waiting, funding on that. So to pay the bills, we need to borrow, and that's reflected in the reports that the CFO has provided to PAR.
I might just pass around and come back to you. How does that sound? So I've got Deputy Mayor Ryan and then Councillor Fowler.
Thank you. Through the chair, Alex, I was just wondering if you could expand on the transformation evaluation report, what that looks like, what we'll see of that, and just I guess hoping that might be able to help us expand on, communicating that with the community and tangible outcomes. That's question 1.
Okay, so the transformation was based on a business case that was actually agreed by, I think it was the last council, it was the council before that, so it's 2022, before the elections in 2022. And that set out what the transformation was set to achieve and what the benefits of the transformation would be. And so evaluation is now taking place against what was set out in that business case and the benefits, and then also looking at what else might have been achieved through that transformation process, recognising that things changed along the way. Setting out what's been achieved, what's still in train to be achieved. So I think it's set out in the business case. It wouldn't all be done within that space of transformation. So we're expecting quite a comprehensive report evaluating against what was set out in that business case. And I planned and been discussing that with the team that in these sessions that we want to have around scrutinising costs, that we actually try and have early on, if we've got that report in time, a session that's on transformation and getting an understanding about what that set out to do and what has progressed, so that we have that as one of those workshops, subject to what council might agree later on in the agenda.
Thank you. And then just question number 2, my final question. I guess we're talking about lots of themes in here around capacity, workload, everything that's coming down on councils. And I appreciate what you're talking about in terms of the work programs that we have little control over. But I guess I'm quite interested to know how you're approaching reprioritisation for staff. Because we're talking about well-being and what we can control. What the approach is there in terms of just managing their personal workloads and abilities.
Yeah, and that's something that we are working on, and it is a challenge because we're dealing with lots of very important things. But it starts with getting a clear idea of what governance priorities are, and then myself working with my exec team there in terms of their priorities, and we have a way of then cascading that through the organisation. So all of the exec are working with their managers to clarify what their priorities are, and then reevaluate that as inevitably new things come in that we need to respond to. So there is a process there that we're working through. It's not perfect, and we keep needing to balance things. And I think we all find that challenging because we're dealing with lots of very important things that if we don't do them or we delay them, there are consequences for the organisation and the community.
Is that you?
Yes.
Yep. Councillor Thowning.
Yeah, I think we addressed this in the PAR, but for the benefit of those who weren't watching that meeting, and just to clarify in my own mind as well, I note the roughly 46% variation on the capital income there, and on page 32 it says most of the income is still expected. This is with reference to the event centre, Forester Gallery, etc. that we've talked about a lot. When it says most of the income is still expected, which parts of the income is not still expected? Is that the perhaps the 2 courts, or is there other parts of that we might have questions about eventually receiving?
So I think it's fair to say that until we see, I think you mentioned the 2 courts at the event centre. So as far as we're aware, there aren't sponsorship agreements for those at the moment. So we need to say that without those, for us, that is uncertain. The trust will say that they will get that money in, but until those agreements are signed, then we have to say there's some uncertainty over that. Whether we'll get all of the funding for the centre that was committed to.
I think it's just limited to the 2 courts, which we need to be able to sell some sponsorship to at some point.
So I'm looking at my CFO. I'm not sure. It's just limited to that, but I haven't got a list in front of me that I could tell you accurately where we might be saying at the moment we're not sure whether all of that funding will arise. I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I guess at this point with the final project finishing up, it's all about the full extent of the cost of the project and the contingencies that are needed, that sort of thing. So we're in constant communication with them, trying to ensure that all funding that is required for phase 1 is received as soon as possible. But it's just uncertain what level of funding will be required because we aren't certain on the final cost of the build and the amount of contingency that will be required and all those sorts of things. So it's just a bit quite uncertain timing and amount at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor McCone.
Yeah, thank you for this, Alex. And reading through, it's probably your summary that really on page 16 that I think that we probably should all be aware of that. And it says, I quote, the council has minimal staff capacity outside of what is planned for its core business. And we need to focus and prioritise the use of staff resources. And then it goes on at the bottom to say, even with a clear focus, there is a risk that the council governance and staff will stretch beyond current capacity over the next 12 months. I totally agree with what you're saying there. So do we need to actually prioritise your KPIs now? So instead of having 20 of them, we chop them down to 4 or 5 so that you can actually focus in one direction?
So we're going through a review process as we do at the end of each year anyway. And the employment committee is discussing a slightly different approach, and there'll be a workshop with the whole of council on that. But yeah, I think don't do it now, but I think we need to be realistic going forward. What are the real priorities and what might just have to wait? And it impacts you as it does impact me and the staff team as well.
Yeah, I think on that page 16 that looking forward to the next 12 months, the priorities there are about as far as we get, and that's going to be an overwhelm. That is probably the easiest way to put that. Councillor McCone, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Holding.
Just in regard to the concern about no resourcing for the reforms and the pressure on staff that's causing, how are we going to build that piece of work into our budget? Do we have any idea of cost or where it was allocated from?
So I think it's about how do we maybe use our resources differently. I know there's always a focus on where we're at with staffing, and we report some figures in here, and in terms of our permanent staffing, we're there or thereabouts in terms of the target that we set, which was through the transformation process to reduce our FTE, but we're carrying quite a number of temporary staff at the moment, and I think realistically we're going to need to continue to have some temporary staff, not necessarily the same people, but some temporary staff working in the organisation as we deal with the changes. If we don't do that, we're going to be reliant potentially on contractors or consultants to do a lot of the work. So it's something that we need to keep reviewing, and I think it's about being realistic about how quickly we can get to a position where we're not carrying temporary staff, given all the changes that are going on. We need capacity to do things, and it's about at the right level. Much of the work, in terms of the planning, falls on a small number of senior staff within key areas, and so it might be that we look at how do we free them up from some things to be able to deal with, particularly the reforms that are coming our way or that we're in the middle of at the moment. But we haven't provided for it in the budget, because we're trying to keep the budget tight. So that the message is there's no slack in the budget.
I think just to add to that too, and this is more of a national level rather than what we're doing internally, the conversations that I've been having with DIA, and they've come to us just recognising that we're dealing with all the problems of the small council and the overload in that respect. They also recognise the Southern Waters and how we're in that stand up the water CCO space now at the same time we're doing the reform space. So they are recognising the absolute overwhelm, and DIA have said, keep coming back to us and talking to us about how we can help, and let's see if we can bring that to government officials. And I think as well, pardon me, part of the Head Start proposal is part of that discussion as well. I think that there's more potential, and we don't know any of this for sure, but they have sort of said, look, there'll be help out there. We don't know that that's going to look financial for those that step into the Head Start space. And through that as well, DIA recognising that we're stepping up 2 spatial plans, not 1 like everyone else has to do, which even at the 1 level, every council was going, this is going to be an overwhelming workload with a really short time frame. So we're dealing with that in every space, and a really high level thing, DIA is saying, how can we help? We recognise that you in particular as a council are dealing with a really untenable workload, but whether that actually translates into anything real, we can only keep the pressure on and see how we go. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mel. Through the chair, just a question with regards to the PMO. Given that our sort of large 3 capital projects are basically completed, and we're going to be handing over the waters element to Southern Waters come 1st of July, what role do you see for the PMO moving forwards?
So that's all to be determined through the organisational strategy and working through the implications of water transferring. I envisage that the Southern Waters will have a PMO because it will have a big programme, and I envisage, whilst I don't know what the process is at the moment for transferring staff, but I envisage that there'll be a number of our PMO that will be looking at Southern Waters as to where their future lies. We will still have a programme, and we'll need to determine through, working through the organisational strategy, what does that mean in terms of, having a PMO and what size that would be. But whatever, we need to right size in all our areas, including the PMO, to what we need going forward and what we can afford going forward. I think that applies to PMO and every part of the organisation.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mel. Couple of things. Page 8, you talk about the CCO needing to develop a water services strategy. Where will the costs of developing that strategy sit, please? And page 15, it's really outrageous to read that staff have been spat at. And I'm just wondering how many instances of that have actually occurred.
I think one's too many, isn't it?
Yeah, so the water services strategy that sits with the with Southern Waters for them to fund and develop. There will be a cost on us in terms of we will need to put staff time into that to help them do that, because they don't have the staff they need at the moment. Those staff sit within the four councils, but yeah, the development of that sits with Southern Waters. In terms of our staff costs won't be recouped, no. And that's what I'm trying to say in this report is we need to make sure this CCO is successful. It's our CCO, we own it, and we need to make sure it's successful. It doesn't have a full complement of staff at the moment because those staff sit within the councils, and it's not taking on the services until the 1st of July, but it needs to develop its water services strategy before then. So that the water services strategy is its equivalent of its long-term plan and sits in a time frame similar to a long-term plan as well. So we will need our staff. So, for example, our asset planning team will need to be involved in helping develop that water services strategy. And no, I mean, that sits in terms of the cost of water because it needs to be done. So it sits with us at the moment until it transfers. In terms of staff being spat out, I'm only aware of one occasion, but I'm not aware of everything that staff have been subject to. We've been trying to encourage staff to report all incidents so that we've logged them and we can get a picture of what's going on. Sorry, but not all staff are reporting incidents. They're not logging all of the incidents. So I'm sure there are many more incidents that we're not aware of.
All right, so if that's all councillors on that report, I'm just going back to where the start of it is. All right, page 5, moved by councillor Hopkins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ryan. All right, any other comment? I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried. All right, so now we will move on to the representation on the regional planning governance groups, which is page 34, I believe.
Yes.
Voila. Welcome, David. Is it yourself? Sorry, who do I pass through? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Timino. We've been asked effectively by the Otago group to put forward nominations for a sort of interim spatial planning governance group. At the same time, we thought it was efficient to also put forward a nomination for a similar group to be formed in Canterbury. It's yet to have a request for that, but I think it's well in train. And it's kind of an administrative step in the meantime, but effectively the recommendation seeks nominations for each group and also delegates the mayor the ability to substitute should the need arise, as well as a delegation to allow the governance group to appoint an independent chair. So that means that if our members are appointed today, they also have a delegation to act on behalf of council in that group to appoint its own chair. So that doesn't have to come back to this council for another process. There's also a note there around the Runaka involvement, so that's for them to decide, but it's just noted for completeness. Happy to answer any questions. It's a pretty straightforward process, but yeah, there's other comments in the report about implications with the Head Start program, etc. as well. But this work needs to carry on in the meantime, so that's why the report's here today. Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've been given a clear steer at the moment that the spatial planning will be sitting in the current regions, which seems like a little bit of insanity to me, and it's a message that I'm constantly putting to senior or central government officials whenever I get the opportunity, because when we know that we're going to have to land one place in the Head Start or backstop or whatever it looks like in the simplified local government, we will be landing in one area, and to be doing two spatial plans at the moment is backwards, and it's like many of the decisions we're making. So I find it really problematic, but it's the situation we're in and we need to prepare for it. This year, the initial discussions, I guess, at things like Canterbury Mayoral Forum were about putting the mayor into that space. We have negotiated that it can be an elected member, because I think it's really important. The level of workload in this, on top of everything else we've got going on, is immense. I want to thank Councillor Thowning and Councillor Hopkins for making themselves available for this. I've got Councillor Thowning across both the Otago and Canterbury, because I do think that one of the biggest things we're going to find when we're trying to prepare for the future is being stuck in another situation where we have two spatial plans stood up and we sit in somewhere that's going to have to enact both of them. It's just craziness. So at least we can have a level of consistency across the two conversations. It won't necessarily be reflected in the outcomes, but we can but try. And I'll take any questions we have on that. Councillor McCone.
Well, I think you've answered them, because the two names are there that they give their consent, so that's pretty straightforward. Secondly, it could be the longest or shortest governance group in history. And thirdly, we must at some stage pick left or right. And so, but to do it, to cover things off, I would have no problem in moving the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll take that as a movement. Councillor Hopkins.
Well, I have a question.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Probably to you, David, Mr. Campbell. On page 30, just a moment, 36, the group would operate, this is these spatial planning groups, the joint committee, or sorry, the informal alternative to a joint committee, would operate by unanimity, reflecting the partnership nature of the regional spatial planning process. So the first question is, given that you have said, and the new act seemed to say, each area within the bigger region has to develop its own spatial plan and feed that into the regional one, and the presumption is at the outset that it would be a mosaic of those separate regional spatial plans. If that is the case, why would unanimity be necessary?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. You're quite right that within a region there may be sub-regional plans. For example, in Canterbury there might be a South Canterbury sub-regional plan which could be developed. And obviously that would need agreement of those entities involved in that. The overarching group, which is what this report's talking about, is saying that they would need to operate by unanimity and hopefully adopt any sub-regional plans, because that's been done at a lower level. The group across the top of it would say, well, they've done their work. We don't need to go and question it again from a Canterbury-wide perspective. So it does allow that kind of local flavour a bit more. Yeah.
And just very quickly, my other question, noting that you've said that the Rūnaka will be invited to nominate representatives to the groups, should this be their preference, how many representatives would they be invited to nominate?
Thank you for that question. It's one I probably can't answer, but I imagine, given they're going to be spread across, or Ngāi Tahu will be spread across the whole South Island, they'll want to work out their resourcing to cover all of the regions, and how much they can afford to contribute to all of those processes along the way. So I don't imagine it'll be a huge number, but they'll need to work it out a bit like councils are at the moment. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to recall those conversations and I'm not aware of what we landed on at the Otago Mayoral Forum. I believe in Canterbury they may have been talking to, but I think that was being left in the camp of the Rūnaka. So yeah, so it'll I'm not entirely clear on that one.
The reason I ask is simply because, I mean, with an open-ended invitation, there is a risk of one group having a disproportionate number of participants in these groups, or the possibility rather than risk, but with possibility comes risk. So I think it might be important to resolve that matter numerically as well as socially.
If you want to respond to that.
Well, I guess that could be up to the group or the mayoral forums to perhaps guide that if they can. Yeah. But I don't think we can influence it here.
So I've been a bit lax on cheering, but I have got a mover in councillor McCone. Yeah, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ryan. Any other conversation on that, councillors? Councillor Holding.
Just in regard to, we've done some spatial planning work, will that be part of the work that will feed in, or we have to redo some of that we've done? And again, being on the joy of having two borders, initial costs, we'll be doing that twice across two councils. Any indication of what the initial cost will be?
I'll pick up that second cost one. Yes, we will have additional costs, but I guess each of them, I believe, are pro rata across the community. So it's the portion of our community that is covered by the plan. So in theory, some of it shouldn't be double up. It should be sort of proportionality, but there will be some costs that are, when it comes to getting people to meetings, when it comes to bits and pieces, there'll be some things that are just a direct double. I'll pass the rest to you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Holding. It's a good question. Throughout this process, both regions have been doing a stock take on what has or hasn't been done. So they have noted, of course, that we've got a spatial plan for Oamaru, Kakanui and Western. We are probably due to review that next year anyway, so that will feed into the process quite well in terms of timing without, having to redo the whole thing. It's just a review of where it's at, basing on that NPSUD report that comes to council every year to say where things are tracking. So there'll be gaps across the region that we need to plug, but at least for our major population area where the growth modelling is needed, that's already kind of largely done. Yeah.
So I'm going to put this in, just recognising, and I know that Councillor Hopkins has said he won't be voting. He's going.
Interest in one and will not vote.
So you're declaring interest, and he will not vote, which is fine, and I think that's probably the right thing to do. Councillor Thelning, you put your hand up.
Yeah, likewise, I'll declare an interest and not vote.
So I've got Councillor Thelning and Councillor Hopkins that will abstain. Just recognising though too, this is not an extra paid position, so they're certainly not getting any pecuniary interest in this. It's just a little bit more fun to keep them busy. So I'm going to put that, which is approves the nomination of 2 elected member representatives, basically in Otago being Councillor Hopkins and Thelning. Then looking to Canterbury, and they're still clarifying what that looks like. We know that the initial discussions have been around one, so that's for Councillor Thelning. Delegates me the authority to be their stand-in if one of them falls over. We don't want that. Sorry, it's been a long day, hasn't it? Delegates authority to the interim regional spatial planning group to appoint an independent chair, and the notes that the Karunaka will be invited to nominate representatives. So if we're clear on that, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried, unanimous, and just noting the Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Thelning abstain from the vote.
I'm happy to have the vote in favour of 2, 3, 4, and 5.
I just put them all, sorry,
Oh.
Councillor Hopkins.
Sorry.
I just put them all, so we'll just, okay. 2, 3, 4 and 5 were also voted on by Councillor Hopkins. All right, so now we will move on to the road naming policy on page 38. Mr. Campbell.
Hopefully another straightforward paper today. Really, it's just an update of an old policy, and the strategy and policy team did a lot of the grunt work on this and liaised with their infrastructure team as well. It kind of sits with planning because we look after road naming queries and requests, and then bring those to council when people want to name a new road. We don't get too many of those at the moment. So essentially, it's just some minor changes in the document itself. It talks about updating it for the roading database on page 44, the symbology on page 45, just to move with the times, and then helpfully on page 46, the appendix 1 talks about other related documents, so people can actually go off and find things that relate to road naming policy, particularly the Australia New Zealand standard around addressing and road naming. So yeah, it's really just to give it a refresh and keep it up to date, but nothing contentious there particularly.
Cool, thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor McCone.
again, I'll just move that recommendation. It's just a box ticking exercise and let's get it done and get on to some real stuff.
Right, yeah. Councillor Thowning.
Just one question on wording. The 4.3.3 on page 44 currently reads as though it's requiring the residents of property owners to support the change. I wonder if we just reword that to say something like, for a request to rename a road to be successful, at least 80% of property owners on that road must support the change, or something along those lines, just to tidy it up.
Yeah, I'm getting what you say. Do you get what? There's just a wee bit of clarity on the 4.3.3 there, basically to say for it to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't changed from the current policy, but it's just saying at least 80% must support the change before they even bring the request to council. So we could reword that if needed, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely get the intention. It's just in case it ever did become an issue. And likewise on a minor one on page 44.h, I think there's a typo in there to tidy up. Should be the same name as the existing road, possibly. But yeah, just those two minor points from my end.
Yep, no worries. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I have one very small question as well. On page 45 under C, short names for short streets are suggested for practical reasons. Now, if you're going to propose short names for practical reasons, shouldn't that apply to all streets? Because the practicality is names on maps, on diagrams. I'm just being serious here. I don't get the logic of connecting a short name specifically with a short street. Sorry, is this dumb? Is this silly?
Like it's a reasonable question. Mr. Campbell.
I'm not sure I want to respond to that. It was in the existing policy and we haven't changed it. No one's raised it at an officer level, but it seems almost a bit redundant when you think of the existing names we have around town for longer streets. Might be Nen or Usk or something like that, but they're not particularly short streets.
I don't think it's a die in the ditch thing. So if you want to see it removed, I'm happy to see it removed. It's a suggestion. I think we can either remove it or leave it there. I don't think it's really going to make any difference. Councillor Lewis.
Further to Councillor Hopkins' suggestion, has 7 Mile Road been measured recently to confirm that it is actually accurate?
Right, we're losing this battle. I've got a movement from Councillor McCone. Mr. Cook.
Thank you. Can I just clarify the change that was suggested for 4.3.3? Was that if 80% of the residents approve it, then council doesn't decide otherwise? Does that remove the council decision-making process from that?
I guess what it's just trying to clarify, because when a request is made to name a road, at least 80% of residents or property owners must support the change. So I guess that he's trying to say essentially, unless full council decides otherwise, it's just a bit of a not quite clear sentence, because it doesn't actually sort of say there's no success in that line, if you get what I mean. It's not saying that for it to be successful, it needs to both have 80% of residents and unless the council decides otherwise. That the success of it doesn't actually come into the play there. So it's not a full sentence, I don't believe. Mr. Cook.
I would have thought you wanted to have unless the council decides otherwise, because you could get percent of residents come up with a quite ridiculous road name that might be totally unsuitable. and you'd
I
want to
don't think
override
that needs to be removed. I think what the question is, when a request is made to rename a road, at least 80% of residents or property owners must support the change. Like in order for it to be made or anything, like there's no must support the change unless council decides otherwise. To support the change to make that change, there's no action in there. Sorry, I'm not being very clear.
Surely the logical thing to do would be simply to delete the phrase unless the full council decides otherwise, because the control or the discretion council reserves for itself is still captured in the sentence. There is no guarantee that a request will be approved. So if on that basis it would read, when a request is made to rename a road, at least 80% of residents, property owners on that road must support the change, full stop. There is no guarantee that a request will be approved.
But must support the change for it to be considered. That's probably the bit that's missing, for it to be considered, and then unless full council decides otherwise. So there's still a council role in there, but it's just we're not quite finishing the intent. Mr. Campbell.
Perhaps help. It might be the case that the 80% threshold is there, and where you get a case where it might be 3 out of 4, so you get 75%, you can then override that and say, well, the majority still want it. And the road naming itself, there's still to go through a process of checking with us if it's a suitable name to start with. And then the council still has a decision to make when it comes to council on the road name. So this is really just saying if the threshold's not met, council can override that, because you might have the odd situation where they can't quite get 80% because of the number of owners or something like that. So we can tidy it up just to make it really clear that's the case. But it's basically signalling that you need the majority, but if you're just short of that, we can kind of override that for different reasons and move it along.
So I was going to say that's how I read it, was that the unless the full council decides otherwise was giving council discretion to accept below 80%, but I think the wording isn't clear. So I think you could put a full stop after the word change and then say the council has discretion to decide to accept renaming requests below this threshold, and then clarify the final decision on all renaming will rest with council. That's it.
Everyone happy with that? Councillor Lewis.
Just a quick question with regards to the name selection criteria. I note that similar names within a subdivision are not allowed, which makes a lot of sense. Is there any restriction in sort of geographical location regarding how close, if you've got a couple of subdivisions close by, there could be some confusion there. So is there actually, obviously different towns you can understand, but is there any geographical limitation with regards to those names?
Through the 1989 local government amalgamation, we ended up with double ups of road names across the now Waitaki district. So we're trying to avoid that regardless of location itself. But yeah, there can be confusion when there's subdivisions as well, particularly private roads that are created and private lanes that aren't proper roads. So yeah, we just have to do a check to make sure we're not doubling up or close to other road names.
I think it covers off anything else in the district for anything new. I'm really going to try and land this because we've spent way too much time on this. I think we've got a few wee tweaks in that, and we can have a level of comfort on that. I've got a mover in Councillor McCone.
And I'll happily second it if we add adopts the road naming policy 2026 with amendments as agreed.
That's fine. So seconded Councillor Hopkins. Do I have any more discussion? I don't really want it. So all in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that's carried. Now we move on to number 47. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. So page 47, councillors, and that moves on to recommendations from committees, and this is the PAR committee resolutions. And essentially what's gone then is we've gone away and worked out what the most practical way of carrying out what the intention of these conversations in the PAR committee were, which is where we've landed on, which is on page 48, the recommendations. One thing just to raise that I was thinking in this one is number 3 agrees that these public workshops will be led by the chair of the Performance Audit and Risk Committee. And I've got all the deputy chair if the chair is unavailable, because I don't think we want to get ourselves in a state where if the chair is not available, we can't do any of these. It ties ourselves in knots a little bit. Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of derailing the whole meeting, I thought I'd start with a moment of levity before we got to the serious stuff. I consider this a bureaucratic masterpiece. I've managed to turn 2 sentences into a 6-page report, including a discussion of, does meeting really mean meeting? So thank you very much for that one. But yeah, as the Mayor outlined, it's just looking at a practical way of implementing a resolution that went through the part. Hopefully that meets the expectations of Councillor McCone, who moved the original motion, and the members of the part that voted on it. And we did recognise the second part of the resolution that we were talking about this morning in terms of a venue to have discussions about a number of matters, particularly efficiency and effectiveness and cost control. So as the Mayor noted, this is sort of the solution we've come up with, and hopefully that meets everybody's needs. And the explanation was just there to make sure that we are all on the same page and it is delivered as effectively as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neil, I was wondering whether or not you want to speak to this before we pass it around.
No, I don't think there's anything that I need to add. I fully support what's being proposed, that we have the monthly workshops interspersed between the quarterly PARs. I think moving to a quarterly PAR, my original concern was that we wouldn't potentially address some of the things that we do address through the PAR on as regular basis as we do now. But I think the workshop achieves a lot of what we need to by having a look at the financials for every single monthly workshop that we have, and then the quarterly PARs can really focus on the sorts of issues that we were looking at this morning. So I'm comfortable as chair that we'd still retain the oversight that we need, but at the same time allowing us to do those deep dives that we discussed in this morning's session.
Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, I'd concur and justifies it, and it's a compromise. I would have one question though on number 2. It goes up, agreed financial and other matters in the leadership report section of each council agenda. Should that be not each council meeting? Other than that, I'm pretty relaxed.
I guess the agenda is the paperwork for the meeting.
But if there's no leadership report, then is that excluded?
No, what this is saying is that we will put a short leadership report to each meeting outside of normal cycle. So I put a report quarterly on performance. This is saying that each month we will put a report in there in the leadership reports that addresses the financial position and any other significant updates.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan.
Thank you. Just wondering, I guess, without the sort of the requirements around a meeting in terms of publishing documents and agendas beforehand, what sort of timeframes would we be looking at for workshops in terms of when we could have the information that's going to be discussed at the workshops kind of in front of us to prepare for those workshops?
The current practice is to try and get everything to you a week in advance, no matter whether it's a workshop or a meeting, and we aim for that.
Councillor McCone.
So just get my head around that. So instead of meetings, they become workshops. So what are the terms of reference? So does that workshop then have to recommend to the PAR committee before it recommends to council, or can that workshop recommend to the whole of council of what it's going?
Well, they don't have an official ability to recommend because there's no decision making within workshops. But what we can do through that, and I think that that's working with myself and the CE, if there's something that's coming up that needs to be addressed and it's coming out of the workshops, then I think it's a paper too, whether it's council or the PAR, and that can then hit the cycle. If council's meeting more often and it's something that's a bit more timely, that's how we'd probably deal with that.
Yeah, because all I'm scared of is that it might drag out to 6 months before you actually get a result from where it's coming from.
My recommendation would be that it goes straight to council if it's something that they're working with, because it is effectively the PAR in a workshop form rather than a council meeting. So going to PAR will just be a bureaucratic process that it didn't really need to go through.
So I think it'll depend what it is. So if it's something that we go, hey, there's an immediate win here, a saving or an efficiency, then we'd look to get that onto some sort of paper onto the next council agenda for the council to consider. But also what we're trying to do is combine this into the long-term plan process as well. So there may be some things that come forward that we go, okay, there's some options here, and then we'll have some sessions with the council in terms of the different options, what are the trade-offs that have come out of this, and that feed into the long-term plan process and what we might consult on if it's service level changes and that sort of thing that we're looking at. So I think it'll be a mixed approach, and we'll just be flexible and try and navigate which route it needs to go.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. The last thing I want to do is dump more work on the staff that are under the pump already. But what I would like to ensure that when we identify something like that, we can actually move on it quickly rather than have to wait for the inevitable time it can take.
I think where your safeguard is, if something's landing out of a PAR meeting, it can go to PAR. But I think having myself on the PAR committee and in these workshops as well means we can also look at ways of getting it straight on the council. So I think we've got bases covered. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, there is another very simple solution, and was employed by the committee that was looking at possible amalgamation of the museum and the gallery on one site. They would have workshops to discuss specific areas, form a view, and the workshop would conclude, and a brief formal meeting would immediately follow, at which point any matter that needed to be voted on, either confirming a decision or making a recommendation to another body, was passed. And that could be done in this instance as well, at the behest of the chair, in my view. My question.
I'm going to respond to that one because no, I think when we actually want to have a really good process around this, and some of the stuff's going to be quite meaty, it needs to be out in the public, and we need to have that time with it being on the agenda and things. And so to have something that hits PAR informal meeting for a discussion a week before, and we make a decision based on that, and then decide on it at a meeting on the same day, is really not the kind of decision making we want, because it gives no ability for our community to stay up with what we're trying to do.
The proposal is for the workshops to be open.
Yeah.
Yes, but let's not also forget that the PAR doesn't have any voting rights whatsoever in any case, and so you couldn't have a workshop
subset. Recommend.
Yes, but you couldn't have a subset workshop of the PAR making recommendations that then went to the PAR to vote on without going to full council. So I don't think we need to try and boil the ocean here. What we're trying to do is just establish a cadence of workshops that you can have some good, genuine discussion and deep dives into things that, by having the mayor sitting in there, they can kind of shepherd where it goes to after that.
I'll just pass me to Alex.
Sorry, I just add on that as well. I mean, I think that's why I was saying we need to navigate our way around it. If it's something that's obvious that is a quick win, we can be agile and get something to the next meeting. But that example you quoted, that's not a quick win. That's a substantial change to a service. And I think we need to bring that back to the council, along with lots of other things that maybe come out of these workshops, and go, okay, we've got a range of options here. One of them is, we're going to combine the gallery and museum onto one site. Another option is this. We can't do it all. Which ones of these are we going to do? What's going to be producing the most benefit for the limited amount of resource we've got? Or what is the right timing of these, recognizing we can't do everything at once. So I think we're going to have to work this through. Some things could be done quite quickly, and some things we'll need to put in the melting pot in the consideration of the long-term plan, because there's substantial changes to how we're operating and have cost in terms of money and resource, and we'll need to balance all of them and see what's doable.
So back to you, sorry, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, my question is, I like the officer's proposed recommendations. The one thing I'm unhappy about is the comment at the bottom of page 52, developing the next step would be to develop a revised meeting schedule to apply for the first 6 months of the 2027 financial year. I would like to see this initiated earlier. I don't see why it couldn't be.
I've got a draft. Yeah.
Sorry?
Can we just be clear that the financial year starts next week?
Oh, sorry.
But we can do it sooner if you'd like. No fear, that's fair.
Sorry. Forgive me.
No, fair cool. I would have shared your angst if it was 1st of January. Councillor McCone.
If you already don't have one, I would like to move that motion of those recommendations, even though 5 lines turns into 6 pages. So, yeah, I'm quite happy to do that.
Just checking if you're happy for number 3 to add all the deputy chair if the chair is unavailable.
Yes, more than happy.
Right, seconder, Councillor Lewis. Any other conversation on that? Right, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried unanimously.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so now we will move on to recommendations from the Assets and Infrastructure Committee, page 53. And who wants? Mr. Cook. I'll let Mr. Cook open the meeting.
Oh.
Not open the meeting, start the report.
Thank you. This should be fairly easy. It's gone through the Assets Committee. They recommended all the recommendations came to council for approval. I suggest we take the paper as read.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins.
Happy to move.
Right, moved Councillor Hopkins, seconded Councillor Holding. Any other discussion?
Yeah, look, sorry if I may, I just have one question. There's a reference on page 56 to the need for the occupiers of the sites to ensure there is title amalgamation. I think they also have to pay an assessed price for the additional land. Would the price they pay for the land have the costs of title amalgamation deducted?
No, I think they have to pay for the full cost of the process and then purchase. They need to pay for the full cost of the process and then purchase the land. So it's.
Right, so I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Moving on to page 77. Compilation of minutes for May 12th. Councillor McCone, was that moving? Seconded by Councillor Cowles. Any other discussion on the May 12th minutes? I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. And then we move to page 90, which is the minutes for May 26th meeting, extraordinary council meeting. Moved Councillor McCone. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lewis. Councillor Hopkins.
I just have a question, a comment, not a criticism. I should have mentioned this with regard to the May 12 minutes. On page 83, the minutes recorded discussion that's included in the minutes after the resolutions. And I just wonder whether it would make more readable and logical sense if the discussion preceded those. And in these May 26 minutes, I notice on page 105, the mayor is reported as asking for a debt leniency report to be presented at the next council meeting, and it hasn't been. So is there any intention to have such a report presented, and if so, when?
Can you tell me what page you're on there, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes.
The mayor says many things. She forgets what she says.
105.
105.
Under carried unanimously in the middle, the mayor asked for it. Hang on. The mayor asked for it to be reported in the minutes that council requested a report to the next meeting on opportunities for debt leniency.
And I believe that that discussion was because that was the next meeting at that stage on rates was going to be us adopting the rates. So there's probably, that's where it becomes a little bit more confusing because we've since inserted different meetings in. So I guess what I've requested there is basically, it was understanding how we look at you know, our rates rebate, not rebate, sorry, our penalties and things, and how we might take a softer approach, and that has been sort of discussed. So I guess it's just making sure when we do have the annual plan come to us that we've discussed how we plan to approach that. Would be my level of comfort in that space. If we're happy with that. No worries. Okay, so for that second one on page 90, May 26th minutes. I had a mover and a seconder, didn't I, Arlene?
Yes, it was councillor McLaren. I think councillor Holden. Did you see?
Holden. Yep, that'll be fine. Okay, no, that's all right. I don't remember. Right, so I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. And yeah, we're about to move into the public excluded agenda. So just want to say to those that have been watching and have joined us throughout today, thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll have all the results of today's meeting around things like your annual plan will come out and through our comms channels, and we will have an annual plan come back to us in an extraordinary council meeting, but we just will have to wait to see what the timeframes look like on that. So that will come in due course. In the meantime, I move from the chair that we move into public excluded. Seconded Deputy Mayor Ryan. So I'll put that all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Thank you all for being here.